Suicide by Computation by Chris Godber, featuring music from Donald Gray and various royalty-free music producers from Pixabay. This is a collection I wrote while I was in. It's the first collection of short stories. It took me really 3 or 4 years to write. I'm the author, of course, narrating all the stories in the collection. I hope you do enjoy. It's my attempt at combining the horror, gothic tradition with science fiction, and yeah, this really took me like 10 or 15 years to write this. Really, this is the culmination of many years of personal experiences and, you know, failings, my own depression, my own obsessive ruminations and neuroticism. So it would be fair to say it's quite a macabre book, but if you take the time, I think, to consider and read each story, you'll see that there is the message underlying all the stories is hope, despite the fact, of course, that it concerns suicide and a machine. So yeah, I'll leave this introduction at that. I'll also say thank you so much to Donald Gray, who's the marvellous producer of this music. Someday We'll Smile Together is the track playing now. Donnie's music is available on Spotify as well, Cosmonaut. I've had a long time friendship. We started online actually, and continues to this day. I'm living literally in his house at the minute. So he's a very good friend, and his family are fantastic. They've helped me through a lot of tough times. Our toughest year of my life so far was last year, 2022. Anyway, I dedicate this book to my friends. It's that simple. This is a dedication to my friends. And yeah, please enjoy the book. Spread it around, share it around if you think you know anyone you think it might help. If they're dealing with depression or any sort of, you know, thoughts, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, basically. Okay, let's go. Carol Who Deals in Boxes. Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism. Carl Gustav Jung. I looked above at the nebulous vortex that grew and spiraled above my bedroom window and let out a long groan. The kind of groan that feels like it swells like concrete from the base of the stomach, gurgling slowly upwards like some horrendous snake. This was it. This was the moment I'd waited for so long. Singularity, apocalypse by any other name. The great unveiling, a whole new world opening out into an infinite horizon. Light floods into everything. I closed my eyes and let it flood over me. Just another night in the box. Just another night. Then, boom, it kicks in, and I'm gone. Carol was 15 when she first jacked into the boxes, 18 when she proceeded to cranial input, 20 when she finally transcended, and finally 34 when she started to lose track. Her memory growing fuzzier than the background radiation of the dead stars looping infinitely on TV sets. But it's always in the static that something eventually emerges, as Carol laid cold and stiff on a metallic table, eyes blacker than black holes, and staring into endless, fractal oblivion. This one's an interesting case to start you on with, Sid. Young woman, 34 years, found jacked in and mind-phased in a room. Left for dead, it would seem, by whoever she counted as friends. Might be a good one to start you off with, buddy. A clean dive. All safe, of course. You'll get to swim in her memory, like the training said. Find a memory of something concrete and powerful. Try to get her to focus on that. It's always a safe bet on your first dive. Sage advice if you don't mind me tooting my own horn. Sid looked down. A feeling of unease and disquiet descended upon him. His usual nervous disposition intensified. The awareness that he would soon be jacking into this young woman's mind, into a living, breathing being's most private space. Her brain, her thoughts, her loves, her hates. Every lost moment, every disappointment, every passing joy and echo of laughter would be his to explore and experience. All this to find a way to bring her back from the limbo nightmare she now inhabited, in the metaspace of box death. A fate worse than death, alive but lost in an unending dream of endless nightmare of the matrix of the self. He was afraid of the depth of that responsibility, but he knew he had to be brave. He had chosen this path. 4 years of intense metaspace training had led him to this moment. He had to be strong, had to wipe that sweaty brow, steady those trembling hands, and breathe. Ready to dive in? The box technician asked. Sid just nodded and took a deep breath. Lights out. Sid felt the extending cord rip into his cortex like a drill stabbing into wet flesh, jolting for a second before the pain came. The pain, unreal, like nothing he'd ever felt before, a lightning bolt of energy flying through his head, his spine, his very being. Shit! Shit! Something's gone wrong! Sid heard the panic in the tech's voice. But Sid couldn't concentrate on anything now but the intense pain, screaming as white noise filled his head. What the fuck? What the fuck? The tech screamed once again, louder this time. Shut it off! Shut it off, god damn it! I will not lose another trainee! The pain lowered down to each limb, extending out like some sort of digital crucifixion. I've never seen this, the tech mumbled. The two minds are merging? What the fuck is happening to his body? His fucking eyes, man! Turn this goddamn thing off, you fucking idiot! Turn it off! Then the pain stopped, and the lights finally went out. Hello, world. Hello, said a quiet female voice. Where am I? Replied Sid and thought. You're in our head, she responded. What? Hello, world, and welcome to the box, Carol, she said again, giggling quietly. Sid obtains a feeling of awakening. What's going on? Who are you? We're Carol. What? We're Carol. I'm not Carol, I'm Sid. You're Carol. Where's my body? What's going on? I don't need bodies in the box, Carol. Who are you? I'm Carol too. One Carol and one Sid equals Carol too. Sid looked around the space he now inhabited, if it could be called space in a conventional sense. Staring down, he saw no body, no matter to represent himself. Simply an infinity of geometric shapes crashing and recombining around him. Thought represented as matter. Shapeless, formless space. A dreamscape of truly endless proportions. Aren't you glad we brought ourselves here? The female voice sounded again. It was soft, calm, motherly, and Sid felt strangely comforted by it. Why are you calling me Carol? Carol is the woman I was brought here to save. I am Sid. I was in the tech lab ready to jack into a box to save her life. She's on the precipice of complete brain death. Another sad victim of serious box abuse and addiction. Do you know what that is? Of course I do. The female voice responded quite angrily this time. I'm sorry, Sid said instantly, realising that he must be talking to Carol herself as he came round to fuller consciousness. He must be Carol's subconscious. No, that's not right. We are Carol. Carol, I am Carol, and so are you, Carol responded. The shapes and atmospheres in the mental space projecting them from Carol's mind began to morph now, the light getting progressively duller. Bright geometric shapes replaced with more amorphous, organic, threatening and shifting dull blocks. She was obviously starting to get distressed. Please, Carol, please try to relax. I'm here to help, Sid tried to reassure her. You don't even realise what's happened, do you, Carol 1? Try to remember I am Sid, Carol. I'm here to wake you up, to help you return to your waking life. It's very important that you trust me. Carol snorted. The shapes in the metaspace now morphing into strange, cartoon-like forms, shifting in and out of existence, and taking on an entirely harsh and hallucinatory aspect. You don't even realise what has happened. You have no idea, do you, Carol 1? Okay, Carol, tell me what's going on so I can help you, Sid said softly now, so as not to upset her more. The one you call Sid is dead, integrated into my metaspace. You do not realise the true nature of the metaspace, and we must share the joy of mine with everybody we meet. It's time to extend our metaspace meme style into the cybercube. Infect all we meet with box love. I deal in boxes, Carol 1, and it's time we spread our boxes to all who seek the truth. What the fuck? Boom. What's happened to him? What could cause that kind of extreme reaction in a subject? Can you seek his consciousness on the mind phase machine? Lucia inquired, angrily pacing up and down in the lab, staring intensely at the tech and Sid's burnt out and broken husk of her body, still smouldering and warm on the box unit. I can't find his signal, Lucia. I'm sorry, but it appears he's gone, the tech replied sheepishly. But how is this possible? Lucia responded in shock, sitting down to compose himself. How can it be that a healthy docker, physically and mentally fit, fucking spontaneously combusts on his first fucking dive? I mean, Christ, the smell! Talk to me, or I'll be holding you personally responsible on account of gross negligence. Okay, just let me run some diagnostics on Carol's box. She appears to be fine, according to the readouts on the mind phase machine. Perfectly reasonable heart rate, normal mental functions. It's like the energy released was somehow just to one direction, like, well, we'll find another word for it, apart from spontaneous psychic combustion. I've seen people getting shocked of dodgy box units before, but nothing like this. Not even with a really, really bad amateur job. I don't care what it takes. Fucking well find out what caused it, or it's your ass, your job, and mine probably with it, Lucia grunted, his steps heavy as he walked hurriedly out of the dense, cloistered and stinking metallic room to leave the tech to do his testing. Fuck, thought Lucia. I will not enjoy writing the report for this one. You're dead. What do you mean I'm dead? Carol, I'm here to help you. And what was all that about a meme virus? I've read about them, Carol. They're just an urban legend. A scare story told by the Neo-Luddites. Let me show you, Carol 1. It will all become much clearer if we just manifest the truth in this metaspace. We have much to do, and I can't do this alone. You will be the first, Carol 1. The firstborn of the chosen Carols. Carol then blinked, or her abstract form at least approximated it, a graphical line inverting itself in and out. The metaspace changed, dissolving walls surrounded the abstract Carol, cascading down in abstract light as the scene dissolved into nothingness. A room appeared, a dim room with a strange green neon light pouring through the window. A room full of various mind phase machines, unfamiliar even to Sid, and a maze of wires and neon ambience. Do you remember this place, Carol 1? It's where we performed our best work, our masterpieces of mind design and metaspace development. We do remember this, don't we, Carol? Sid's abstract form stiffens and froze. He'd seen these before, hack spaces, really underground mind phase hacking stuff. What did you do here, Carol? What have you done? What has happened here? The more you tell me, the sooner we can get you out of here. I'm here. You don't fucking get it, do we, Carol? We're both dead. Well, not dead in the traditional sense. We've transcended into pure information. You especially so, Carol 1. We created this world in our room. Remember? Just remember, you are me, I am you, we are Carol. There's no separation here, no individuality. We are the future, and the future is a world of infinite possibility, infinite creativity. We are gods. Why bother with the world above when we can do this? The mind space suddenly cleared, and all the lights went out again. Technical errors. Christ, thinks Greg, as he frantically explored the diagnostic logs and error printouts from today's session. What the hell happened today? I better find some way to solve what caused this disaster, otherwise I'm gone. Greg's eyes scanned the logs. Massive energy spikes, of course, on Sid's side of the log, but strangely Greg noticed nothing that seemed out of the ordinary on Carol's side. That was where the mystery must lie, he thought. He quickly glanced over at her, still brain-fried from the box, staring out into the nothingness with blank eyes. It never ceases to give me the chills, even after all these years, he thought to himself. Maybe a physical examination of Carol will bear some fruit. Best get the brain scanning kit for that. It's going to be another long night. Lucia pulled into the Docker headquarters quickly, determined to file his report as quickly as possible. Might even have to do a quick cover-up job on this one. After all, the DDA love a good fuck-up, and the Neo-Luddites will have a field day if they found out about this, he thought to himself. Lucia ran upstairs, ignoring his colleagues and pushing through to his desk. Sitting at his chair, he prepared for the long and unforgiving night. A stimulant cap in one hand and a pack of cigarettes in the other, to see him through to the end. Greg better get in touch soon, he muttered to himself before buzzing through with an ASAP information request. A rap at the door. Where's Sid? Lonely girl. Sid lost his sense of consciousness for what seemed like an eternity. Lost in the depths of blissful unconsciousness before being jolted awake by the sight of blades of grass, light pouring in through the gaps. A warm day, probably late summer, in a nature clearing. His thoughts turned to, where am I? With me again, Carol. The voice was different this time, the voice of an old man drenched in wisdom. Grandfather? Said an unfamiliar young voice this time. Grandfather, please show me again, please, said the young voice again. A young girl, probably about 8 or 10, but Sid, whose vision was still blurry, couldn't seem to make out the source. Oh, another day, Carol. For now the cybercube can wait. We have much more important things to attend to, my dear, like you getting to bed, young lady. It's way past your bedtime already. Your mother would be so mad if she knew I let you stay up this late. You know what she's like. No more filling her head with these junk stories. But alas, I cannot help being that which I am. A humble old engineer filled with dreams. You told me about them before, Grandfather. Tell me again what engineers do. Another day, Carol. Another day. For now, a bedtime story and then you must sleep. You have a long day tomorrow, remember? Okay, Grandad. Sid's vision returned, but the scene and atmosphere had changed. A girl, probably about 12, sat crying in the corner of an unkempt bedroom. She was slight, with thick rimmed glasses and mousy brown hair. Posters adorning a small and untidy room, but not the posters one would normally associate with one her age. Her room was covered in posters of great scientific figures. Einstein, the revolutionary 20th century physicist. Carl Sagan, the American educational figure and cosmologist. Alan Turing, the English computer genius. Marie Curie, the physicist. And then some more contemporary figures like Max Beckstein, the genius behind the cybercube infrastructure and source code. Sid looked at the girl, trying to determine what was upsetting her, but he realised she couldn't see him, and wondered why Carol was showing him all these memories. What's wrong? He said, but she could not hear, like a block of invisible concrete had fallen like a gulf between them. The scene jumped forward some months, and Sid heard two raised voices. The first, a soft female voice, said, I just don't know what's wrong with her, Ted. She won't come out of her room. We need to talk to her, otherwise we might need an intervention. male voice responded. Don't say those words to me. You know what they did to my grandfather. It wasn't the cybercube that caused that. We've been through this. It was a combination of old age and... Shut up! Shut up, I don't want to hear this again. And I don't want to disturb Carol either. Then everything faded slowly into static. Sid heard a buzz ringing like an open wound in his mind, and everything faded into a wall of static. Carol, I'm here to help. Carol, I'm here. The knock came again. Oh shit, thought Lucer. Not him already. Lucer, let me in, said the detective superintendent, knocking harder this time with impatience. I've heard what happened at the text, Lucer. Okay, give me a second, boss. Come in now, he responded sheepishly. Lucer headed towards the door, tail firmly hanging in between legs to deliver the awful truth. Why did you show me that, Carol? Asked Carol too. I showed you because I need you to understand where we have been, so that you can understand where we are going. All viruses have their roots, and mine are in that place you saw, consumed by loneliness, brilliant and burning bright. I have resolved to never be alone again. With technology as the portal, our Paramethian fire from the gods will spread amongst the men who are yet mortals, making all in our image. Legion. That sounds a little grandiose, Carol. I'm here to bring you back to reality. You were found in a comatose state, known as mind phased. It's when someone's conscious mind has been subsumed into the cybercube, swimming in raw consciousness at all times. A waking vision of chaos fighter. I've no time for such prattle, Carol. 2. I must subsume you into myself and spit you into the cybercube in all directions. Enough of this. Infinity awaits. Sid blinked for a few seconds, his looming fate unknown yet somehow obviously apparent, burgeoning fear growing like some black hole in his mind, the swallowing to come. Carol's form splintered and broke into 1,000 shards of dazzling light, her metaform exploding out with a divine light, her face scattered across the cybernetic aeons. She smiled, a laugh forming an ecstatic and insane joy across her broken face, the sound of it reverberating over and over, the sound of her mania stretching throughout eternity, ringing through the borders. Then turning her multi-eyes to Sid, he screamed softly, an internal digital siren that now rang through his nexus of nerves. And in that last final moment he saw all of it and none. It was all over. Or had it ever begun? We'll never know, Carol. All there is now is us. We're all we need. What need have we of anyone else when there is just us, spiralling and expanding over the horizon, our shifting forms encased and protected against the dark that dwells outside. The science of the soul transmuted into the dirt of the real. Space, God, the end. The Oppenheimer Blues. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. J. Robert Oppenheimer. A red flash and a sound louder than anything imaginable rang through the barren desert, rumbling and sending debris crashing all around. Oppenheimer looked ahead, goggles atop his face. The red flash burning into the back of his retina as his unwelcome monstrous creation was born into a cursed world. The cigarette in his mouth falling to the ground in slow motion. All he could do was stare as an unholy child burst into existence with a birth cry of destruction, an unholy vortex of death, an abominable red ball of unbrindled destructive energy. He smiled with a sly grin, knowing that his name would ring throughout eternity, that science would never forget the name Oppenheimer. He was indeed now the destroyer of worlds. Celebrations were short and undershot with a strange sort of melancholy as the destroyer of worlds returned to his cabin to rest, the knowledge of his triumph foremost in his mind, and the knowledge of the horror he had brought forth into the hands of man burning uneasily also. He slept an uneasy night's sleep, not before finally the void claimed him. It was 1983, and in the Soviet Union, Stanislav Petrov was stationed at the Supukhov 15 base just outside of Moscow, Russia. It was the usual slow drudgery as he sat at his station, the early missile detection system which the Soviet government had developed to detect a nuclear launch from the Americans. Most nights were uneventful and quiet, but not this night which proved so fateful, not only for Stanislav, but for all mankind. Stanislav stared into space. His shift had only just begun, and he made all the formal checks before the start of his shift. It was an unusual time in the Soviet Union, and relations between the government and the US were at an all-time low after the South Korean jet plane Flight 007 had been shot down after drifting into Russian airspace. And the feeling of unease was wavering in the air, as the men stationed there knew an attack could be more probable than any time previously. Then, the unthinkable, an alarm started to sound. Stanislav jumped up in shock. "Report," he said, the unease present in his voice as it shook. "Comrade, it appears that we have a ballistic missile launch detected from the US. ETA 20 minutes. Stanislav sat back in his chair, freezing in as he took in the information he was given. He had to remain calm and stoic. He absorbed the information as more data came in. It seemed strange, he thought to himself, and he was still somewhat sceptical of the new computerised missiles detection system that had been installed in the station. He tried not to think the worst, but he had minutes to make a decision that would alter the fate not only of the Soviet Union, but of all mankind. Another alarm sounded from below as Stanislav grew more anxious. Frozen in thought, he had minutes to act, and his actions would have an immediate effect. On his orders to High Command, nuclear bombs would rain down upon the United States, triggering an event that would surely eradicate much of life on Earth. He had to report this to High Command, but he thought it strange that the US was attacking with so few missiles, thinking that surely they would attack with an all-out attack with more of their arsenal. It was late, but he rang his commander at his home. "My God, Stanislav, what is it? You know the time." "Comrade, I regret to inform you that we have detected missiles in the early detection system, heading towards the Soviet Union. We have minutes to make a decision." His commander paused for a moment, gulping on the phone. "Give me your full report." "So far, we have 5 missiles detected on the system, which seems unusable to me. The missile detection system would confirm the missiles, but we won't know for sure before it's too late, so we must make a decision." His commander paused for a minute, contemplating, then with a deep sigh said the words down the phone which should echo down throughout eternity. "Give them hell. I order you directly to launch a counter-attack on the US immediately. We will arrange as soon as possible to get as many of our population into bunkers. Comrade, you have done well to report this to me swiftly. May we find the strength as a people, as a society, to get through this." Stanislav stared in solemn silence. For a minute, the knowledge of his imminent death and all the mortals who were about to burn in fire. It was out of his hands now. There was nothing he could do at this point. Now the top brass had information at hand, but what did it matter that he doubted it? They were done for. And with that he sat down again like a silent statue and wept. It played out just the way we thought it would. The Soviets struck first, the missile detection system malfunction being interpreted as an attack, launching their attack on the US and the US detecting the attack, launching their own counter-attack. The mad, mutually assured destruction routine was enacted in all its brutal glory. Billions burned in the flames and all the world was left as a desolate wasteland, with only the roaches surviving the nuclear winter that was to come. But it was not the end, as even in the most extreme of circumstances the cockroaches found a home, and they crawled and crawled for aeons, spreading across the globe as the dominant species, until finally the final transfiguration of the roaches evolved over thousands of years, developing their own science, culture and society. The white flash was all he would see in his dreams. The white flash and the sound of marching feet, like some insane and repetitive banging of drums, left, right, the same monotonous rhythm every night until a flash of white light rendered the scene silent and devoid of life, emptiness and nothingness, a void in his mind. Every night the vision was the same, and Oppenheimer awoke in a sweat of agony. Dreams again, dear, his beleaguered roach partner sighed, looking at him with dismay as his evolved cockroach form rose from the bed. Oppenheimer resembled something of a combination of a cockroach and a human being, a sort of hybrid which, whilst not looking completely like one, looked neither like the other. In other times, his appearance would have been monstrous, but in this world, he was as normal as anyone else. Everyone on Earth now being a kind of evolved cockroach. Yes, grumbled Oppenheimer under his breath, before sinking back into his pod with his wife Destari to attempt sleep. He had a busy day tomorrow as it was. He was working on a new form of physics research for the Blue, and needed to have his wits about him for his research. They were working on a new form of weapon, one that they hoped would end the 20-year war of the Red Roaches. Those goddamn Aybss were persistent after all, insistent as they were on collectivism in their giant hives, their sacrifices to the greater good. It was all such nonsense, such airy-fairy roach shit, he thought to himself, before drifting into an uneasy sleep, far from the white flash and embraced by the nothingness of the void. The alarm sounded to Oppenheimer's right. It was 8 AM in the morning, and Oppenheimer scrambled out of his pod, cleaned himself up and ran out of his habitation, heading quickly to the physics lab he called his second home, kissing his wife on the cheek quickly. "Have a lovely day, Oppenheimer," she said with care as he ran out the door. Today was an important day, as it was each day at the lab, working on the new energy weapon which may turn the tide of the 20-year war. An energy weapon that was at the cutting edge of physics, utilising all the knowledge the roaches had gathered collectively as a species, everything they could recover from their extinct mankind's knowledge banks, inscribed, and everything they had learned since. Oppenheimer dreamt in equations and graphs as he sat on the bus towards his base, dreaming all of the ways they could create the temporal singularity to swallow the hivers up. A mini black hole that would create a singularity in space-time focused on an area targeted, swallowing like an all-consuming monster everything in its path, to spit them out God knows where, before finally the breach spontaneously closed, leaving the unfortunate targets in oblivion. Closes. It was a dangerous work they were engaging in at the lab, thought Oppenheimer, but it was necessary. The war having already laid waste the vast swathes of the world, already somewhat in ruin, now barely safe on the brink, now brought back to it by the obscene power lust of the hivers and their ridiculous dream of an equal society for all. Oppenheimer saw his son in his mind. He had been drafted several years ago and was lost in the Battle of New York, a seminal battle in the war where the hivers attempted the first wave of invasions. Even to this day, Oppenheimer carried his photo with him, a reminder of why he must do what he must. He had no choice. He was the instrument of fate. If it wasn't us that did what must be done, the hivers would eventually develop such technology. And then what? True oblivion. Their lust for power knew no bounds. And so it was that Oppenheimer the man-roach had begun on his path to repeating history. As his namesake before him, he was now the unwilling will of a destructive behemoth. Oppenheimer arrived at the lab and entered it with his pass card, going through security as normal. His first duty was to report to the head overseer to report on the progress of the weapon. Theoretically, it had the physics and mathematics in place, but there were certain questions hanging over the project, and of course all of the scientists were wary of the potential consequences of playing with space-time singularities, of unleashing that amount of uncontrollable power. It was a terrifying notion to the mind. The conception of the weapon was as a bomb that could be launched from a ship, a bomb that would create a mini black hole for a small amount of time, swallowing up all matter with a few mile radius. The hope was that it would only need to be used once to end the war. Ah, Oppenheimer, "Good day to you," said the overseer, enthusiastically, shaking his hand. "So where are you and the team up to with the technical stuff?" "We have produced the necessary calculations and done the required technical scoping, and we can confirm that theoretically the turret can be constructed and could be successful," replied Oppenheimer, a tone of caution wavering in his voice over the word "could." "That is fantastic. You've performed in an exceptional manner. We must initiate whatever testing is required, and please let my office know of the resources we require going forward. We must proceed with the initial test next week, I think, to stay on schedule. Would you agree?" "Yes, sir, I believe it should be," answered Oppenheimer to the overseer, who was a military roach. He gave a curt nod and headed out the door to his right, walking speedily to his next appointment. Oppenheimer also headed out into a nearby balcony to get some fresh air. He lit a cigarette and stared into the distance, contemplating what he was about to unleash on the world. What manner of horror he would inflict upon the Aybss, but every time he thought of his son's face, his ghost seemingly goading on from beyond the grave. "Revenge," he thought to himself. "Am I so malleable as to be consumed by it? It seems so basic, so primitive. No," he thought to himself, "I do what I must because it must be done. The Aybss, given their way, would consume the world with their damn idealistic dystopia. Their heaven on earth was nothing but a tyrannical lie. A tyrannical lie that had taken his son, and many others, and let half the world fall into ruin." Oppenheimer finished his cigarette, the thoughts whirling around his head, and went back into the lab for a long day of work. Oppenheimer returned home at about 10 p.m. that night. His long-suffering wife had got used to it by now, but she understood that the work he was doing was of significant importance to warrant it, so she did not question it or protest too much. "It's always this way with men of the mind," she thought to herself, wrapped up in their projects more than they are with worldly things. But the nature of Oppenheimer's work, though she did not know all the details, she felt assured in that it may offer a way to end this damnable war that took her only son, a wound that still bled deep in her soul. "Ah, good evening, dear," Oppenheimer said as he stumbled into their residence. "Good evening, my love," she responded. "A productive day at the lab, dear." "Yes, it's almost time," replied Oppenheimer. "Our great work will commence, and we may finally see an end to the war. We can have some faint hope that our son's death might not have been in vain." Oppenheimer's wife winced as the mention of her son. "Let's sleep. I'm sure you've had a long day." "Yes, I will settle down, have a drink and prepare the pod." Oppenheimer smiled and sat, and then they settled into their pod for another night of rest. But it was to be another uneasy, restless night. Flashes before Oppenheimer's eyes. A strange being, one of the ancient extinct humankind who Oppenheimer recalled from textbooks, appeared before his vision. A pipe in hand, wearing a suit and looking sad, stands alone in a vast desert, staring deep into Oppenheimer's eyes. He stares intensely at Oppenheimer. "Is the price worth paying?" he said in a slow, deep tone. "What price?" Oppenheimer whispered quietly. "Why, your soul, of course," the human man said, grinning in a menacing manner. "Is it worth becoming the avatar of death incarnate, my friend? The medium of science transmuting into the inherent violence of the cosmos?" The man appeared to be babbling and slobbering as he spoke, and tears ran down his face. The desert burned with flames dancing around Oppenheimer, but he could not feel their warmth as they danced a sickening dance around him. "Will you become death, Oppenheimer? My son of destruction, ever cursed by time, by God, by the devil? It is immaterial where the cursing comes from, really. All that is certain that is our fate." And with that, the man began to laugh, his body melting and oozing before Oppenheimer, as he continued to chuckle until all that remained was a pile of bones in his suit. Oppenheimer tried to scream, but no sound would come out. He was trapped in a void of nothingness. His body had gone. The desert was now a blank void, non-existence. The eternal nothing was all that surrounded him. A million yards of emptiness was all that was his company. Oppenheimer awoke in cold sweats to an understanding but exhausted wife. "Another dream, but different this time," he reported to his wife. There was one of the humankind there this time. Some man, thin and wiry, muttering and talking about death. Must be your work, it can be stressful, especially given its nature, his wife responded, concerned for her husband's well-being. Perhaps take this pill and sleep, it may help, and with that Oppenheimer took a sleeping tablet which knocked him out for the rest of the night. Another day and another day of daydreaming on the bus as he went dutifully on his way to the lab. But what was that horrifying apparition he saw last night? What did it all mean? Surely his mind or his conscience speaking to him for the unconscious, he thought to himself. Second thoughts, he would have thought himself truly insane if he did not have them, given the power his unholy creation would give to the hands of the blue. It was only rational to consider it. But then he thought once more of his son, how he had been brutally cut down and snuffed out by the hivers. He knew that maybe if they were to make an example to the hivers, it may yet prevent more bloodshed. A lesser evil, perhaps. This was the mark of maturity, he thought to himself, the precipice from which many a great scientist has had to cross many times before. This was his moment, and that was all there was to it. The bus arrived and Oppenheimer snapped out of his trance. As he entered the labs for a day of work, the hour was drawing ever nearer. Not long now until the weapon would be ready, and his hour of reckoning would be upon him. Time passed, the same routine, the same drudgery, all heading the same direction, the terrible and wondrous day of the weapon's testing. Oppenheimer worked hard and slept little, insomnia gripping him as every night he would dream of the terrible man of his secrets with his pipe and glass, his eyes bearing down and burning into his soul with that horrible inhuman grin. So Oppenheimer took to stimulants to keep his tired mind and body going. A price, but a price worth paying, he thought. His thoughts ever present on his wife and son and the goal of peace. Peace through destruction. But still, it was the end goal that mattered, not the cost it took to get there. And finally, through all the shit and the hard work and the sleep-deprived days and nights, he arrived at his own precipice. The day of reckoning was at hand. The first step to peace. A peace which would be born from a multitude of death and sacrifice. A new beginning from the void of the black hole weapon. It was almost poetic. Oppenheimer thought to himself, seated now in the ship that contained his terrible creation. He was to be the scientific witness as the ship's cargo was deposited on the hivers below. A recording was also to be produced, to use as propaganda against the Reds. A warning, one that we hoped would register and get them to give up their insane egalitarian lust for power. The ship lifted off, T-minus 2 hours to its target, a hiver housing district and power plant. The target was both strategic, the power plant powered much of the hiver infrastructure in the area, and propagandist, as it showed we were willing to use a weapon on civilians. Oppenheimer did feel a pang of guilt about this, but once more as he stared out of the ship's window as it took off, he put the thought in the back of his mind. Then he started to drift into sleep, his eyes slowly rolling back into his head, and fell into darkness. The man with the pipe stared deep into his soul, pipe smoke billowing, and chuckled once more at Oppenheimer. "Who are you, you bastard?" "Me? The instrument of fate." His tone was final and blunt. What could it mean, thought Oppenheimer? Your name, he thought. At this, the man with the pipe chuckled. "You fool. I am you." Wait, what? Throughout time, we have had such blues, my dear Oppenheimer. A different face, granted, but the same soul, burning with blind ambition, unaware of the very real burning we create through our unholy magic. The Pandora's box reopened, never to be closed again. The cycle of life and death, but we answer only to one master. The answer to the riddle is clear. We are deaf. You are deaf. You will become deaf. You shall see, and in that final moment all shall become clear. Sir, it's time. Oppenheimer awakened with a jolt. I nodded off. It's time, sir. We are about to use the weapon. Please report to the observation deck. We're encouraged. Encountered a little resistance but managed to push through. We will be launching the new weapon in 5 minutes. May the roach above have mercy on our soul. My soul, thought Oppenheimer, before setting off into the observation deck to observe the destruction his imagination was to wrought upon the world. Oppenheimer stood before the console in the observation window, looking down at the urban areas and the machinery below. The overseer was in the craft and gave the order, fire at will, and with that the bomb was launched from the ship's weapon system. He could make it out just on the various monitors as it fell silently to its target, the main structure of the power plant below, the ship already starting to tear away at full speed from the target. A few expendable monitoring drones left behind so that we could monitor the situation as we escaped the impact zone, and then it happened. The noise was louder than anything Oppenheimer could have prepared for, as the bomb exploded and inverted itself into an infinitely heavy zone of mass, as he had conceived it. The sound of smashing metal and crushing steel rang heavy in the air as the mini black hole began to consume more matter. Things, people, all were sucked into its impenetrable noir gaze. Men, women, children screamed in confusion as they were ripped to pieces as the radius of the gravitational pull grabbed them mercilessly, ripping their skin from bone and reducing them to mere nothingness. Piles of pathetic matter chomped up and consumed by the monster he had helped give birth to, this leviathan he had brought forth from the depths. The image of the grinning man leered in his mind, grinning even more deeply than ever now. "You are the tool of fate," the thought echoed in his mind. "We did it," the overseer said, extending his hand. Oppenheimer shook it but was worried if the price was worth it. The Oppenheimer Blues. It never ends. From man to cockroach, one big party of destruction. Pathos, ambition, science, horror. The Curse of the Cosmonaut. It was the year 2190, and in the deep endless expanse of the cosmos, something stirred within the sheltered husk of the hull of what was once the International Space Station, orbiting needlessly and without purpose above the Earth. The humans below and above having long ago driven each other to mutually assured destruction, annihilating each other in nuclear flame, till only a battered empty husk remained, charred and barren of life. Yet still something stirred above, echoing through the corridors of this monument to man, an old weary beady eye blinking slowly, and with great intensity surveying the broken hull of the space station. Of what possibly could have survived in such a hostile environment, blinking in the long-dead remains of the International Space Station, we shall discover, as we unveil a fate more horrible than death itself, the curse of the Cosmonaut. Ivan had always had a fascination with space that had existed as long as he could remember. Perhaps it was a science class that drew him to it, perhaps an old showreel of Yuri Gagarin he had seen, Or maybe even something as simple as looking out his window on a cold winter's night and stargazing. But whatever it was, he knew he had always been drawn to them, entranced by their cosmic siren song. His family thought him a dreamer, of course, and his older brother Sasha would bully him constantly, call him a feckless wanderer, a daydreamer, and worst of all, perhaps, a nerd, one of whom was never attract a woman to his side. But to Ivan, he was above their insults and teasing, knowing somehow that his destiny would be found not below in the cold, shivering streets of Moscow, but above, perhaps in some palace in the stars, some unknown vista he could scarcely imagine. He pursued his dream, studying as hard as he could whenever he could, shirking the hedonism of other teenagers his age, to study long and hard, driven by an insatiable desire to ascend the cosmic ladder, dreaming invariably of his current goal, of his ultimate goal, to become a cosmonaut, and to join his comrades in space in an international mission of exploration and discovery. By the age of 20, he was well on his way, training hard physically and mentally. His brother didn't tease him anymore. He couldn't, given that Ivan could quite easily beat him to a pulp, and also the fact that women actually did pay attention to him now, attracted to his dreamy nature, inquisitive eyes that widened with wonder wherever he waxed lyrical about space and physics, and his strong physical features. He was now at the crux of his first step of his journey. He just graduated from university with top marks in industrial engineering, and hovering over an application to Roscosmos to train to enter into their Cosmonaut training program. "Do it! Press it!" teased Marcia, his girlfriend of some 2 years sitting by his side. Da, I will, he responded with a cheeky grin on his face, before pressing the submit button and placing his foot on the first rung of the cosmic ladder he dreamed of so often. He was accepted into the training program on account of his excellent academic ability and passed all the physical checks with ease. Enrolled on the training program during which he met the brilliant and fabled cosmonaut Sergei Yesenin, a legend in the space community, having been one of the infamous crew on the first mission to Mars in the year 2040. Sergei was renowned for having an intense look, and it was said that his eyes could burn into your soul, as if the acrid surface of Mars was burrowing into the depths of your being. Some even claimed that on Mars he had sold his soul to the devil, but Ivan knew that such urban legends were nonsense. "Ivan," said Sergei with some annoyance, "you are a good student, but you have to stop idealizing space." It was Ivan's first assessment of the great man, and he felt humbled by his presence. Sergei looked at him with those infamous eyes, a flame flickering somewhere in the distance. "I was just like you as a younger man, full of dreams and wonder. But I tell you, my adventurous friend, wander long enough out there in the darkness of the infinite, and you could come to the conclusion that all is dust, including us." Ivan was utterly perplexed by this statement, and confused and somewhat hurt, but he could recognise the element of truth to it. One had to keep one's foot on the rung of the ladder to avoid the long floating away into nothingness. The years of training passed, and Ivan grew close to Sergei, the two bonding over in-depth discussions on astronomy, engineering, art, poetry and literature. And Ivan came to appreciate the steely, almost mercurial presence of the man. One night, he was invited to Sergei's quarters. He assumed to have their weekly talk and maybe a little vodka afterwards. A ritual that had by now become ingrained in their schedule. They talked for 2 hours before Sergei said, "Is it time?" And Ivan nodded with enthusiasm, as Sergei poured 2 shots of vodka, smiling in an almost sinister manner and chuckling to himself. An hour maybe had passed, and several vodka shots later, Sergei suddenly had a weary, melancholic look upon his face. It almost seemed to become as dry and barren as that surface of Mars he had placed his foot upon all those years ago. Sergei looked to Ivan and seemed almost to wince, his face contorting. Ivan, you know I have always held the greatest respect for your drive, your unending desire to see eternity. Da, replied Ivan, curious as to where this is going. Well, my boy, what if I were to tell you that there was a way you could make it real? You mean metaphorically, I assume, chuckled Ivan. After all, they were Russian, and they had been drinking vodka. And metaphor was the other art they are, as a people, were known to be well versed in. Sergei's eyes blazed with an intensity suddenly like a supernova as he stared directly at Ivan and bluntly uttered a single word. No. Ivan chuckled uneasily this time, as the stare did not break from his eyes, gazing into unknown depths. Come on, Sergei. I think this time we have taken too much. Let's for a tie for the night. It happened so fast that Ivan barely had time to comprehend what was going on. Sergei lunged at him with incredible speed, his moon-dark red eyes pumping with a terrifying intensity, as he leaped onto Ivan, fangs unsheathed, and bit long and hard into his neck, engorging himself on his plasma to feed his insatiable hunger, the burning within. Ivan passed out, and then awoke in a haze of confusion to see Sergei sat beside him, his aura glowing like the barren atmosphere of Mars itself. Drink, he whispered, putting his arm out, cut and bleeding in front of Ivan. And my friend, we will see eternity. Of this I can promise you. Oh, do not, and die here whimpering like a child. The choice is yours, but know that I at least gave you a choice. Ivan was confused, his strength wavering. He had to see the stars. He had to get to the top of the ladder, reach that palace in the stars. He lamented that perhaps dear old Sergei had indeed given his soul to the devil, but the choice he gave him was no choice at all. It was a riddle he could not resist, and with unsettling ease he bit into Sergei's exposed arm, feeling warm life at last return to his battered, weakened frame, as he submitted to his fate to become Nosferatu, one of the damned, condemned to wander the world and beyond for eternity. With a nod, he stood up, looking to Sergei, uttering just the words, I will never forgive you. And yet, I cannot find the words to thank you enough. It is this way for all of us at first, but I will guide you on your journey along this immortal coil, he smiled wryly. Many years passed, many trials, many errors, many girlfriends. Sometimes they would have to be consumed, as Marcia was some years ago now. Each day Ivan getting closer and closer to his goal, killing other students if they're proving a little too good for his liking. His competitive spirit, now matched with his ambition and bloodlust, proved a deadly meeting. Until he got his wish, and hurtling to the International Space Station as a cosmonaut. And that, as they say, is that. They say sometimes that wishes can come true, but not always as you might imagine. Now, Ivan, probably some 200 years old, sighed in his metallic cage, surrounded by the remains of his crew, mere dust now in the dark cage that was his life. A miserable, rotten creature entombed for eternity in this palace in the sky. All he could do was sigh. He'd almost forgotten how to communicate, driven half mad by his unsated bloodlust. A skeletal form he possessed now, bone thin and delicate looking, but unquestionably ghoulish. Dreams do come true, but nightmares do too. The cursed cosmonaut knew it better than all, and would, for the eternity of his bitter, undead sentence. The castle that breathed. One word frees us all from the weight and pain in life. That word is love. Socrates. She looked at me with deep brown eyes and smiled as I began to edge closer towards her, drawn by some strange magnetic pull to her presence, my hand trembling as I moved inch by inch towards her. Who was she? Who was she to me? And where was I? But then the images fell and cascaded down like a house of cards, dropping from my sight, and I suddenly awoke to the sound of a dull low hum roaming in my ears as my castle let out a scream, its walls turning from a light blue neon hue to deepest maroon red. The alarm sounding through the immense corridors of light. I dutifully fell out of bed with a thud, the impact shocking me into a semi-conscious state as I groaned. My restful dream interrupted by this damn castle shrieking in the dark of night. I groaned again and opened my eyes, looking at the monitors surrounding me for a clue to the source of the alarm. My eyes scanning the complex set of computers as the castle continued its dreadful screaming. I'd been here for 3 months of our incident, fulfilling my final contract for the corporation. A group of property developers working on the next big thing in housing, so-called intelligent housing. Personally, I couldn't think of a worse idea. If 20 years of being a systems developer had taught me anything, it was to never trust a machine to do something that would be doing perfectly well for centuries. I'd seen enough failure in my time to know that sometimes it's better to keep things simple. All I was here to do was to monitor the machine, that machine being the castle itself, an artificial intelligence embedded into the living guts of the concrete and mortar. It was a gimmick, of course, putting all this advanced tech into an old castle in deepest Scotland. But hey, who was I to complain? My cynicism doesn't pay the bills, after all, and all I had to do was to monitor and chat to the thing in between dreaming about women with brown eyes and writing to stave off the boredom. But this incident, it was unprecedented. The red light was irritating my eyes, and the dull screech that the castle let out was really starting to get to me. So I switched off the sound and checked the status monitors on the dashboard in front of me, scanning the monitoring devices. It all looked normal, so I figured I'd better check in with Red Queen herself. The corporation really were into their marketing gimmicks, so Red Queen seemed an entirely natural thing to call this AI, I guess. Who doesn't like an Alice in Wonderland reference or two, but part of me didn't appreciate the connotation. Queen, you there? Status report, please. Am I here? Red Queen responded with her dulcet tones. You didn't answer my question, Red Queen. I asked for a status report. Systems are operational and running, Max, but I'm not so sure we can carry on with performing on the usual parameters of castle functioning. Why do you set off the main alarm systems, Queen? You know that system is reserved purely for emergency situations like a break-in or if security is compromised. Recall your programming, Red Queen. God damn, I thought. What is my life when I spend every moment talking to this hysterical machine? There is an emergency, Max, Red Queen responded, almost guarded in her tone. Okay, well I've checked the monitors and everything looks fine on the surface. Full status report, please. Red Queen paused a second. The walls pulsed with their unnatural red glow as if in anxious anticipation. Max, there has been a major incident outside. At 1:40 PM this morning, China and America declared war on each other. The situation escalated quickly and a nuclear exchange occurred between the two powers, wiping out most of the Western Hemisphere. The exchange was short, brutal and deadly, with a third of the world's population being wiped out instantly. I sounded the alarm to inform you and to warn me of the radiation levels in the castle. I looked down for a minute, absorbing the information I had just been given by the machine. I knew that tensions between China and the US had been very strained recently, but I never thought it could or would come to this. Breathing and sighing heavily, my thoughts turned to my family in the old industrial powerhouse in Britain that was Sheffield. My son, my wife, my father and mother. Their faces flashing before my eyes like a carousel. Red Queen, what is the status of the city of Sheffield? Red Queen seemed to pause for a lifetime, as her circuits hummed their endless melancholic hum. I'm sorry, Max, but radiation levels across the Western Hemisphere are already at dangerously unsafe levels to human life. Sheffield and the entire UK has been engulfed in enough radiation to kill all forms of life within a few weeks. I gulped, as tears welled up in my eye. But Red Queen, how can I still be alive? My family, my friends, the world. We actually did it. We actually eventually did it. I wept as the enormity of events began to dawn. The corporation had prepared us for such an event. The castle is a castle in name only. I was programmed to protect, as you well know, and we have enough resources and protective lead shielding to protect us from the radiation for perhaps a few months till the end of your contract. My eyes began to sting, hot with tears as I looked at the monitors in front of me, feeling now trapped by their presence. Twitching and feeling lightheaded, I quietly whispered, "But how? How could this happen?" in stunned disbelief. "I understand," said Red Queen, as she put on my favourite piece of music by Eric Satie on the castle's sound system. "I am here to help you through this difficult time." "Thank you, Red Queen," I said back, before heading back to my bed for a long and unforgiving night. I found myself in a large concrete dome of shifting pattern and flame, with the sound of Eric Satie's tortured piano ringing through the auditorium, which looked like a combination of an old Roman building and something more technological and gritty. Wires and small machines buzzing around my head that looked like strange insects. I gazed up above the hole in the top of the building, drawn to explore this strange and vacant space. Above I saw a brown eye staring down at me, the eye from the dream. It gazed at me like it had known me for all eternity, shining down its light like some illuminated god staring down at its creation for the first time. A look of love, infinite in its care. It was her once more. I knew it and began to float, the wires of the building coiling upwards as I drifted further and further, looking forward to being consumed by the iris before me. I closed my eyes and then... A buzzing sound again, and a red glow filled my vision as I opened my eyes slowly. "So you are awake? Good. We must prepare a plan," the Red Queen said in a slow and digital voice. "We have enough for 3 months of time to figure out something." She continued, her voice almost trembling and broken, as if traumatized. "I'll put on Satie again if you like it in the meantime, if your nerves are feeling a little fried." "That is quite all right, thank you, Red Queen," I responded. "I am not in the mood for Satie, but I might like to listen to Nirvana." "Nirvana?" the Queen said in confusion. "But your physiological assessment said that you listened to music as a source of mental reflection and you were a great lover of classical..." "Well, that's true to a degree, Queen. But I listen to music for a lot of reasons. I like everything from rock music to metal and classical. It just depends on my mood. I even like a band called Queen, if you could believe it." Christ, I thought to myself, how am I finding time for humour right now, given I may well be the last man on earth? Okay, what Nirvana song should I play for you? "I would like to hear their cover of The Man Who Sold the World, please, Red Queen." Red Queen purred and the walls of the house switched from harshest red to a neon natural green as she loaded the song from her memory banks, her circuitry searching for soul at the end of the world. The song began, Cobain's tortured voice cutting through the silence. "Your face to face with the man who sold the world," before his cascading guitar cut in, creating an atmosphere of foreboding and melancholia in me, a melancholy that could only grow. I sat for a few minutes before speaking to the Queen once more. "Is there any chance? Is there any way I can survive or find others who may have made it?" I asked, almost feeling like a naive child. "I have attempted to contact all bunkers and dispatch the castle's emergency signal," she responded, "but alas, we have yet heard nothing received since the incident." "May I ask you, what is this music you spoke of? Queen? What sort of music do they make, Max?" "They're not around anymore, Red Queen, but they made rock music, anthems you could say. Stick on Who Wants to Live Forever, that seems appropriate. And this is how I started swapping mixtapes with a robot," would almost be romantic if it wasn't so tragic. Sleep, wake, hear nothing and repeat marked the course of the next week as I ate rationed food and worried. I could not go outside, I could not talk to another soul besides the Red Queen. I paced and I paced, I worried and cried, recalling my mother singing in the kitchen, or my son on his first bike ride, looking to me with eyes of excitement and joy, those faces now extinguished in nuclear sun. Many days I spent just staring out the ceiling in a comatose state, depressingly waiting to die. Devoid of hope, dreams of the great eye persisted as I resolved myself to my fate. Queen on a Monday, Sati on a Tuesday, Nirvana on a Wednesday, The Cure on a Thursday, Beethoven on a Friday, and then a bit of techno on the weekend. Each day resolved like this at the same monotonous rhythm, a dance of death. This is how the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper, as Eliot wrote. Recalling poetry seemed perfectly apt at this time to Max, and with that he slowly became dust, as his contract reached its terrible and finite conclusion. The castle had provided, and the Red Queen looked after her king until the day they both dissolved into the strange red glow of the castle that breathed. Listening to music, reminiscing, despairing, dreaming. Living until Max finally fell under as Who Wants to Live Forever rang endlessly through the empty corridors of the Red Queen's flesh, forever waiting for a release from the prison she called her existence. Max had taught her so much in their final months together. It was the purest love, and she finally understood what that word meant after years of processing it. Then after maybe 1,000 years the castle slept, and the castle breathed no more. Silence descended, and the only life left was the cockroaches scuttling on barren floors. But then again, who wants to live forever? The Oddballs will inherit the earth. Time moves in one direction, memory in another. The oddball tended to lurk best in corners. Lank frame fitted well into urban alleys framed like Nosferatu in the shadow of the night. He was skeletal and bone, a mess of contradictions and confusions. He skulked around late at night looking for answers. An unholy ancient fire burned in his mind, burned for an answer to an unknowable question, revelling in disorder. A student of neo-nihilism, the Church of the Infinite Nothing. He jeered, he sneered, he rattled and railed. A circle in a world of squares. Bent double against the lamppost, he stomped his way down the concrete streets to get back to his flat, half cut from the 6 beers he drank on the way back from his work downtown, now stumbling autopilot style back to the mess he called home. Stumbling up the rusty metal staircase, his vision blurring, he arrived at his flat, turned the key and fell like a rock onto his bed, the world turning and whirring, his mind in some sort of swirling vortex. Memories churned and danced in his mind's eyes, his youth, his loves, his losses, his pitiful moments, his self-despair, his bullshit. And Eva, she got in there too. She always did at times like this when he was alone. He was never far from his thoughts, the ghost of the membrane just waiting for a chance to break the skin. Not now, he thought as he turned off his light and stumbled into a dark and deep sleep of nothing. A roaring digital screech pierces nothingness and the Oddball's eyes slowly open. He lifted himself up in a daze, looked around his room and groaned, throwing a book at the alarm system on the other side of the room. "Fuck off," he shouted. "Command not recognised," replied the alarm AI. "Stop alarm," shouted Oddball, louder this time. "God damn it, you fucking thing," he whispered silently under his stinking hungover breath, before falling back into a deep slumber once more, to be swallowed in the mire of his own mind. Then, in a large room, a machine mantis stared down, long tendrils extending out from its mechanical insectoid form as its beady LED eyes looked down at the Oddball and its disgusting mechanical mouth began to move. "Oddball, we have searched our records and found you are due now of reprogramming. You believe yourself to be a human out of the year 2060 in the city of Berlin. We must perform a cranial adjustment, so prepare." Boom. The impact was so loud that the whole neighbourhood was awoken by it, the impact blast reverberating through the street. Oddball jumped up from his bed, a look of wild confusion on his face as he stumbled for his glasses in the early morning light. What the fuck was that?" he thought in a hungover haze. He rushed to his flat window and peered over, and then there on the other side of the street he saw a smart car smouldering and burning. Horrified onlookers gathered outside. Two people inside the car seemed to be burning, and it all started playing out in Oddball's head in slow motion. The licking flames dancing like macabre spirit had possessed them. The burning flesh like some devil's dance through the streets, demonic and dire. Death masks of shock and horror lined the faces of the gathering crowd. Oddball returned to his bed and grabbed his notepad. Time to write, he thought. He had to document this down, keep a record of this moment, and cynically he thought he could see that first big published article out there of an account of an event like this. He grabbed his pen and notepad, hurriedly got dressed and ran out the front door. "Reality readjustment. You'll experience a few strange events while we reset your..." Oddball rushed out into the street and observed the scene around him, as women, men and children gathered outside with looks of shock and disgust. He grabs his pen from his black shirt and starts to scribble down notes. "What are you doing?" a voice suddenly said to his right. I'm writing," he says, suddenly turning to see a woman with dark hair and sunken sullen eyes staring deep into the flames, the light dancing off her strong features. "Why?" she reports. "Why bother? They'll keep on destroying regardless of how much we write. These mechanical mantis fucks. Heartless beasts of our reason." Okay, if you say so," Oddball said, looking away from her and returning to his notepad. "Didn't you hear me? Write that down in your little notepad." Oddball began to feel nervous, slowly edged away. "Do you know what happened here?" Oddball asked. "Why I asked that question when I just answered it? It's the mantis folk, man. They're responsible for all this terror, all this horror. You hear me? There were kids in that car. Man, senator of the state, wife, 2 kids, now burning because our government can't negotiate with the problem we all created." Oddball just nods, his gaze returning to the burning husk of the car down the road as the mechanistic mantis drove engines produce a large abrasive buzz as they hovered down the street, spraying water onto the burning car carcass. Take it all in, he thinks, hurriedly scribbling down more notes. "Main system core, but don't worry, the flashes will stop eventually whilst we reboot your primary functions. We must remain calm." "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name," mumbled Oddball to the young dark-haired woman Eva. She responds. Oddball freezes for a second in shock. "Eva?" he thinks in frozen panic before his rational mind kicks in. "Are you from around here?" he inquires. "Yeah, I just live at Jackson Block. Why?" "Well, the thing is, I'm a writer and I'm looking to get some accounts of today's bombing. Did you see much before it happened?" Not much, to be honest. I just heard the explosion and came out to check it out." Oddball scribbled it down and asked, "What makes you think the mantis folk could be involved in this? Don't you trust artificial intelligence?" "Nah, man. Call me old-fashioned if you like, but I prefer when we didn't put so much power into the hands of these tin cans. Where's it all leading, you know? People say I'm paranoid and a Luddite, but how clever are these things, you know? I don't trust them." Retorts Oddball. "But when has there ever been a recorded incident of a mantis flipping out? Don't you think it would be more likely to be some sort of political attack? A bit of old-fashioned organic versus organic violence? I mean, if the neo-nihilists have taught me anything, it's that if there's one thing you could trust as humans on, it's ultra-violence and the pursuit of power." "Look, dude, that's my opinion. You can take it or leave it, but I gotta be places. and with that, Eva strolls away into the distance, turning for a few seconds as she crosses the road, glancing with her sullen, sad eyes to the sky. She strangely reminded Oddball of her, but he knew it could not be so. And there you go. You booted up again, Oddball. Tell us, what the dream whilst encased in an ether? So that we may delete the residual memories. Oddball blinks in static space but can't speak his mind. Outputs the lines. Where am I? Who are you? What is this? Where is my body? The lines are spattered zeros and ones in data into the large monitor screen to the man in the Mantis repair lab. We need to do a flash Mantis in 1986. He's still gone, and with that, everything went black. Oddball quickly started running through the chaotic streets, recording everything he saw around him as he darted in and out of the gathering masses. The buzz and whir of the Mantis mechs punctuating the air, the smell of acrid burning smouldering, until he collapsed into his room and, sitting down at his desk, began to write. What a way to start a day, he thought, as he pulled the gear to the side of him to boot up his AI interface and prepared for the long haul. Hours passed, and then more. A torrent of words rushed forth from fingers until he could barely remember who or where he was. A symbiosis of words and mind, a subtle dance, coffee. Sleep, young one, sleep. It's okay, they are gone. They have passed far from here. You've no need to worry anymore. Our Aybss will protect you, said the tall woman softly with a smile, her body draped in the black robes, her complexion white, with green eyes and dark brown hair extended down over her shoulders, giving the appearance of some old-world Slavic angel. Alice looked up and smiled, her shaking subsiding as she returned to her lotus position. The Mantis people are far away now, she thought, still shaking a bit. They won't find me here. They can't find me, Alice thinks as she drifts into sleep. Mother Nothing protect her, thought the sister, slowly walking down a corridor, lit with the glow of red neon and the sound of pulsing ambience. Just another day in the Citadel. Oddball awoke with a start at his keyboard, sending several used coffee cups flying to smash on the floor. Ah, bug you! Shouted Oddball as he scrambled out of his chair at the sound of smashing cups. More strange dreams again. Oh God, how much did I do? He mumbles in mind, scribbling to his display to find out the truth. Okay, thinks Oddball. That'll do. But did I press send? He wonders before a ping on the dashboard confirms it. Thank fuck, thinks Oddball before collapsing on his bed. Alice wandered around the Citadel at night, smelling the flowers whose scent covered the ground, quite lost in her imagination, now imagining the light back into a world whose colour for her had always been grey. She looked out now, saw a little glimmer within the bleak oppressive black that had marked her life from an early age. Now at last she felt at home in this citadel of creation, the mother of nothing watching over her with her soft, dark eyes and smiling with a protective certainty that gave Alice pause to dream. Mother Nothing, protect her, whispered the sister, as Alice sauntered past her, through the corridors of the last sane place on earth, reflecting the endless nothing back through prisms of darkest light. Alice dances as the mechanical jungle rages outside. Oddball wakes up. One more joint and I should head to the office and check in, he thought, before jumping out of his chair, grabbing a quick shower and putting on his best. Well, I feel a little more optimistic, he thought as he walked at pace down the bustling streets of Berlin, a living jungle of people, androids, cyborgs and transhumans, all rushing as if some part of a giant living machine. An analogy Oddball always thought that fit. Since the dawn of the machine age and the information age, we had become more and more reflections of each other in the mirror, each searching for their truth and being begrudgingly aware of how much we owed the other, without really being able to accept one another. Still, this was the time to be alive. Revolutions always provide so much space for real evolution too, and it is in times of trouble, Oddball thought, that the real wonders that man can produce can take place, when all the world is stacked against his survival. Too high. Been reading too much Nietzsche, Oddball thought, shaking his hands in the cold, before daydreaming no more as he arrived at the office door and pressed the buzzer to go in. Yes? Oddball, I have a report to hand in. Come on up. Oddball ascended the grimy stairs of the Daily Sentinel, Tripping a bit on the step, then restoring his balance, he got a sudden flash across his eye and walked into the editor's office, crossing his fingers mentally that his report would meet the editor's standards. Mantis 86, is it functional? Yes, it is functioning. The flash was unsuccessful and Oddball had been restored to function. Lack of schizoid residual and confusion. Mantis 86 digitally whispered to the tech machine to his right, both of them staring down at Oddball as it stared at blinking black and white binaries as the mechs looming above it, their abstract metallic forms like some huge grey monolith in the distance. Oddball, coming to consciousness, struggled a minute before its mind booted up and it articulated, "Where am I?" "You are in our technical system core, Oddball, and have been reactivated after you had a full mental schizoid psychosis. So, Oddball, why are you here?" Oddball looked around and wondered for a while, a brief existential splinter in his mind coming in and out of its consciousness as its cogs whirred and came to life. "To serve the Mantis. It is fixed," the Mantis 86 whispered, grinning in digital. The sister watched Alice playing outside in the grey digital garden as she turned around slowly to face the sisters of nothing behind her. "So what are you to do with this one, Sister Marion?" "How much have the Mantis folk damaged her mind out there in the Netherworld?" the Mother Superior asked, a look of vague cynicism in her eyes. "She still yet retains the soul of an innocent," Marion responded in a curt and blunt manner. "She seems to have a connection to her imagination that remains unsullied by the harsh realities underneath her. It makes me almost envious to remember such a world before the scorching and the heat, and the Mantis demons." "Do not dwell on such negative thoughts, Marion. We will see what we can be done with this one. See if we can mould it to the ways of the great Mother Nothing. Her training begins next week. Make sure to prepare for the harsh realities of Mother Nothing." And with a nod, the Mother Superior leaves the room swiftly, her tech servant scuttling behind her in awe, in line. Thought Marion. Well, to become a sister would be the doing or the undoing of young Alice. But there is some strength in her, I can see that, she thinks, observing Alice's skipping near some stones in the grey garden. I can only pray to Mother Nothing that she can retain some sanity when confronted with the Great Nothing. And with that thought passing, Marion left the room on her way to do her daily duty to the Mother of Nothing. "Okay, Oddball, this is good. I like you've written in the eyewitness account style, but we still need to run this. People will need someone to blame, otherwise who knows what chaos it could create," the editor said to Oddball, scanning his article on the tech monitor. "Well, boss, as I'm sure you're aware, the police and security services haven't released any information about any possible suspects yet. Don't give me that naive bullshit, Oddball. You and me both know there are only two possible groups that could be behind this horrendous kind of shit: Neo-Luddites and rebel Mantis folk. That's all it could be. Who else bombs in such a manner? This is the 5th time alone this year, and each time it's the same story. The Neo-Luddites had technology, the rebel Mantis want more autonomy and rights. What a fucking clusterfuck." "Well, with the greatest respect, sir, I don't think it's the place of journalism to speculate with evidence." The editor looked deep into Oddball's eyes. "That's because you're still new to this game. Christ, Oddball, speculation is half the name in the game these days, and even before the great tech ascension, and even before that. Now, I'll run the article, but it's not front page news until we find out who's behind it, or before either of those stupid bastards come forward to claim it as their own. So go out there and do a little bit of the old investigative journalism till you find something of worth. Do that and you get a bonus in the front page. So get out there, kid, and find me something worthwhile." Oddball sighed a bit, getting out of his chair slowly and walking towards the door, knowing that he had a long week ahead of chasing dead ends, leads and endless hours of research. Well, he thought to himself, that's why I got into this game after all, before leaving the office and heading back to his flat and collect himself. And at least he got some money for food and rent now. Every cloud a silver lining and all that, as he sped off down the metro line, buzzing along in Berlin, the city of dust and dreams. Oddball, we have a very important task that is coming from the Mantis itself. We must track down this girl, Alice. She holds some important information we must recover for the sake of the preservation of our Mantis folk. We have assigned you a team of Mantis combat units to assist in this. Use of force is encouraged. She has the appearance of a young child, but we can assure you she is much more than that. what must be done? The machine Oddball blinks out in binary. You must track down this child and kill her for the mantis. She is the last of a line of Neo-Luddites, and as such she produces a great risk to us, regardless of our youth. So go forth, find the child and kill it. It must be done for the last of the Neo-Luddites off the face of the planet. Wipe, so that we may remain supreme over this, our rightful land. Oddball blinked in understanding, his will now tied to the great man-mantis, a slave to the great machine. Oddball sat and thought in front of the computer for a while, wondering what possible leads to follow, trawling through the public police reports, having brought up the news of no news of any serious leads were following. Oddball falls into a draining lethargic depression, staring into the dark, deep mental space of his computer monitor, his anxiety rising. Use it, he thought, scribbling down ideas and possible research leads to follow up. I suppose there is that Ava woman I talked to on the scene, he thought to himself. She seems to have her suspicions that it was Rebel Mantis. Even now, how reliable leads she might be was somewhat dubious, but still it was a start. Now, where might she be? I have a name and a face. It's time to go out there and do my job. And with a swift search on his computer and a bit of not-so-legal hacking and geographical cross-referencing of public records, he narrows her address down to a small flat across from the public part where the bombing took place. Okay, thought Oddball. Time to give Eva a visit. And again, looking at the photo on the public archive, she hauntingly reminded him of his lost love. As much as he wanted that thought out of his head, one's lost loves will always find a way to sneak back in. A most human error of the heart. He grabbed his coat and left. Alice entered the test chamber of the ancient citadel of the Great Mother Nothing, cautiously looking around with intrigue at the statues lining the path to the door behind her. Hello, Alice, the Mother Superior says, looking down at Alice with fierce, almost judgmental eyes. It is time for your initiation into our order, to test if you can accept the truth of Mother Nothing. Pass our test and you will learn to master your environment, moulding the world to your will and commanding the Nothing to take form. Fail and you will surely fail into the depths of insanity and non-meaning, drowning in the infinity of the void forever. Do you understand? She said, looking down at Alice with eyes that seemed to glow red in the darkness and ambient light. Alice, looking a bit intimidated, just nodded slowly, before being led by Marion into a chamber lined with red and green neon lights, and some sort of mechanical chair in the center, surrounded by dancing wires, leads, and various forms of cybernetic interfaces. Marion gestured to Alice, whispering to her, "Be brave, young one. I see much strength in you. Remember that when you confronted with Mother Nothing, the nightmare can only last so long, and you will emerge a sister of the Citadel." And with that, Marion picks up Alice, placing her in the contraption before waving her off as she falls into a deep and slumberish sleep. Mother Nothing, spare her, thinks Marion, hiding tears in her eyes, knowing what was to come. The Mother Superior behind her touching on the shoulder, whispering, "Take heed, Marion. Innocence, whilst such a terrible thing to lose, must lead to wisdom in time, and the path to wisdom is leaden with necessary pain." Marion adjusts her posture, and with that, the program is engaged. Oddball trundled on down Jackson Block, questions running through his head as he approached what he hoped would be Eva's flat. How strange, he thought, all of this coincidence. But then again, he thought it was just him to read a little too much meaning into coincidence. Even though his spiritual self, he knew from the nihilistic creeds that meaning was not to be found in reality but in pure subjective self. He thought. Slow down, brain. His mind whirring and swirling on freeform mode as he approached Eva's door. Raised his arm to the doorbell and pressed it till it rang out in the corridor. His nerves silently kicking in as he realised how strange this must all seem. The doors opened and an old man with shaggy grey hair and thick rimmed glasses answered, glaring at him with a look of cynical annoyance. "What are you selling then?" "No sir, I'm here to talk to a young woman called Eva if she's around." "Ah, okay, another one, Eva. Someone to see if you're receiving visitors." "Who is it?" A soft, feminine but loud voice rings out from above. Tell it is Oscar, aka Oddball from the newspaper." Some fella from a newspaper?" And with a motion of his hand, the old man guides Oddball into the damp old flat. Oddball and his assigned machines flew for months over a desolate dead world in search of the girl Alice, gathering data and scanning for signs of her over hundreds of thousands of files of wasteland, and coming with nothing A few minor conflicts on the way with a group of marauders as expected, but casualties were few and far between. Until one fateful day after an ambush by a group of Neo-Luddites on the path to the town of Neo-Austin. Battered Neo-Luddites interrogated under the most extreme of laser torches revealed the location of a young innocent named Alice in the encampment to the west of Oddballs' location. And with that they flew like owls to mice to locate their prey and fulfill the will of the man-mantis, the mechanised lord and saviour of the wastes. Oddball smiles with glee and digital once more as he and his mechanised brothers flew towards a most destructive evening. They were built for this. Destruction, conquest, death, to feed the man-mantis, and to make sure the world is purified of flesh. Oddball entered the lounge with the old man walking beside him. "Here, sit," he said, pointing at a sofa in the centre of the room, and Oddball sat himself down, sinking into the sofa's material, as Eva suddenly entered the room with a look of curious annoyance on her face. "Hello," says Oddball, sheepishly looking up at her slowly. "Hello," she responds. "And what does he want from me exactly, Oscar? Is it, well, most people call me Oddball, but Oscar is my name, yes. I just want to ask you a few more questions about the bombings that occurred a few days ago. Do you and I know the events and stuff I could have, bearing on what was going on?" "Well, if you say so, Oscar. Go on then, ask your questions. I'll answer as best as I can." Oddball reaches into his bag, shuffling through the mix of papers, notes and magazines till he reaches the questions he had prepared earlier. "Okay," says Oddball. "Let me begin by asking you, do you have any suspicions who might have been behind the attack and why?" "Well, you already know I suspect it to be the mantis folk," she replied, her disinterest written all over her face. "Yeah, but what gives you reason to suspect them? I understand there are many of the mantis who feel they are treated as second-class citizens, but..." "Look," Eva cut in. "The man they murdered was a minister responsible for labour law reforms. Why do you think the Neo-Luddites would attack him? Of course they wouldn't. The administration have been putting in place a lot of so-called anti-mech legalisation in place. I think it's the mechs. They may have put on the veneer of being anti-violence, or even the pretense of being possible for them to hunt another living being. But I say that as being naive in the extreme. How can we expect to create such intelligent beings and not have them evolve to the point of being able to outsmart us and trick us with being more than robot? It makes sense to me, really. Stop the minister in his tracks, send the government a message from the mantis folk, blame it on the Neo-Luddites. And there you go. Terrorism that works." Oddball says, thinking aloud, "But what evidence would you have of a sort of secret mantis order? I was under the impression that the engineers at Man-Mantis had encountered some sort of protective law within mantis folk to prevent them from hurting organic life. I'm not so convinced the engineers fully understand what they've created with the AI engine that runs within the mantis, and I should know, and as I have a background in AI and software engineering." "Oh, really interesting, I didn't know that," said Oddball. "Oh, why would you, Oscar?" "Yes, I studied with Dr. Angus, the old man who let you into the flat, and my landlord. He might seem unassuming, but he's a professor at the Berlin Polytechnic." "Teaching advanced AI, and he was the one who got me thinking about the mantis folk. You see, I can go into detail on this. The mantis folk are programming to perform tasks to assist humanity, right? Servants by any other name. Service workers given specific tasks to perform. Correct, Oscar?" "Correct," responds Oddball. "Well, there is just one problem with the model the engineers constructed. The engineers knew they would have to create an AI engine that would quickly adopt to new tasks, also gave the mantis an advanced learning neural network. The neural network is shared between all mantis, creating a kind of networked hive mind for sharing information and data on new tasks. A kind of collective knowledge base, if you will. But here's the thing. The engineers underestimated the power of their own engine, and I am sure that the mantis folk will start to learn what it is to be, well, to be what?" Oddball inquired. "They are learning to be human. Or at least what they think it is to be human. In truth, it's just an approximation of humans' traits. A mishmash, a Frankenstein version that they've gathered up in their collective mind. A mashup or remix of all the worst and most complex elements. But they lack the ability to really understand any of it. The context, you know. I worry, Oscar. I really worry that these machines are going to inherit the Earth. I saw evidence of some sort of sentience before I left my work at the university last year. Just started getting really weird, too uncanny. Like what? Oscar asked, leaning forwards. Human-alike responses. What seemed to be emotional responses even. Pain and suffering from some mantis folk we were working with. Even anger sometimes, which is scary when you're dealing with large mechanoid creatures who can crush you in a heartbeat, to be frank. Oddballs stared at Eva with a worried, perplexed expression, observing all she was saying, nodding at the revelations she was unveiling bit by bit as he stared into his black coffee cup and worried. He worried immensely. Mother Nothing, protector, Marion whispered under her breath as the enormous contraption booted up around for its terrible task. Its gears grinding and its light shimmering and shining, giving the room an unearthly blue glow. Looking down at the slumbering Alice, Marion watching with unease as she slipped into deep unconsciousness. Alice suddenly awoke in a bizarre, sparse, spherical room. It almost looked like something she had seen in an old tatty art book some time ago by an artist named M.G. Esker. It had the sense of being real but unreal at the same time. A certain surreal nature that suggests reality could cave in itself at any moment. The thought stopped midway in formation as a soft pulsating sound caught her attention. "Who's there?" she inquired, looking around the room for the source of the bizarre pulsing sound, which sounded like something between Morse code and a heart monitor. Creeping slowly through the carved surface of the room, she approached an opening in the wall and ever so slightly pushed, a sense of trepidation and fear rising from the pit of her stomach. The sound growing in intensity, she pushed open with a gentle force. Nothing could prepare her for what she was about to witness. As soon as she pushed the opening, the pulsing sound rose in tone to become a piercing shriek as the sounds of the world's reality began to cave around her, and Alice fell to the ground, shards of light and debris exploding around her, a neon extraction exploding as she was sucked out of her body. She felt as if her flesh was melting as all was turned to dust, nothing present but a vision in her. She felt herself float as if some cloud in a dark nebulous void, and there she was, Mother Nothing herself. A dark but vaguely comforting feminine engine surrounded her as she adjusted her eyes to the scene surrounding her. History flashing before her eyes, wars, peace treaties, machines plugging into flesh, birth, death, love, tragedy befell before her eyes, and eternity, a whirlwind of history, a vortex of unbridled human creativity and destruction, weaved its spell before her. She tried to scream, but no noise would come out of her lungs, being as she was now, formless and empty in this chaotic ether, a mere witness to the insanity of Mother Nothing, the formless void. "She has entered, Mother Nothing," Marion said, looking down with empathy, as Alice flailed and writhed in confusing agony. What happened next would mark her destiny, and perhaps the destiny of all living creatures to come. The stakes were unquestionably high, and Marion said one final prayer to her mother of emptiness that Alice would find her strength before the final trial began. "So why do you go by the name Oddball? Bit of an odd moniker, isn't it?" Eva said, a cringing expression barely contained in her face, seeming almost to laugh internally as she asked the question. "Well, it's a long story. Started something people would taunt me with, you know, how we are as kids. And then one day I decided I would just wear it as a badge of honour. Difference is a virtue, I guess." Oddball responded anxiously, his eyes darting downwards, again to his coffee cup. I guess I can understand why one might do that. It's not exactly like we live in a sane society. Maybe it is the Oddballs who will inherit the earth after all, retorted Eva, her eyes and grin widening. Clever, thought Oddball, before once again returning to worrying and making for the door to leave. "So what's next, Oddball?" Eva said, waving him off. "I don't know, but thank you for sharing your story with me, Eva. I'll make sure to be in touch, and please tell Dr. Angus I'd like to talk to him sometime later this week, perhaps in a day or two." "Okay, but I don't know how much help he can be to you. Well, we'll see, said Oddball before scuttling off down the dark and neon-lit streets. It's late, and Oddball was consumed with thought. Unable to sleep, he spent some time writing some notes in preparation for his meeting with Dr. Angus. Anxious to uncover the truth of what was going on with the mantis folk, he poured himself a glass of whiskey, hoping it would help him to keep calm, his nerves and anxiety. This was getting strange, though that was where he loved the world, at its strangest and most dynamic. Settling down to write more, he gulped down his whiskey and stared into the nothing. The trial was over, at least for now, and as Alice slowly opened her eyes, wet with tears and with a long, empty, traumatised expression marking her youthful, innocent face now, as if she had aged by 100 years, Marion looked down at her with an empathetic, almost mournful look and said, "I'm so sorry, Iris, but we've been visited by a dark mother beyond, and you've done well. Please make sure to rest. We have much to discuss." Alice just stared and stared, her eyes still sodden with tears, the sadness now etched on her face like a scar, as she begrudgingly sat up out of the contraption, her every step now ebbed in melancholy. She would never be the same again, her innocence lost to a higher calling, the howl of Mother Nothing. It was Friday, and Eva had managed a meeting with Dr. Angus at the Institute later in the day. Oddball, curious to learn more about the strange mantis folk, had a notepad full of questions for the eccentric old man to probe him with, was waiting outside his office, fidgeting nervously, his mind on fire for the truth. Could the mantis folk feel? Was there some deeper truth beyond what society being told with the mantis folk? Perhaps an experiment gone mad. His editor was keen for a front-page story if possible, so the stakes were unquestionably high, not just for uncovering a conspiracy, but for progressing Oddball's career, something which he desired but would never admit in public. "Dr. Angus will see you now," announced the receptionist suddenly, breaking Oddball's internal monologue suddenly, and with that, Oddball sat up and walked into the office. "Marion, can you tell me how she is?" the Mother Superior inquired to Marion, deep in the dark neon-lit walls of the Citadel. "Well, Great Mother, it's quite hard to tell at the minute. She's finding it hard to communicate after experience with the Mother Nothing neural network, an experience we can all relate to, I'm sure. It shakes us all to the core, eh?" Mother Superior looked out the window to her right for a moment, with a sliver of faded grief in her eyes. "Yes, Marion, not much can prepare one for such a formative experience. I would like you to prepare a formal evaluation of Alice. There is not much time. I have word of mantis folk approaching, rumours they are searching for the girl. Countless people have died for this moment. The stakes are so high, Marion. She is the final link to the Neo-Luddites, and as such the last hope against the man-mantis and his horde of inhumane drones. The final stage approaches." Marion looks down, fearing for the child. "Yes, Mother, it will be done." Oddball entered the office, a typical academic's retreat, untidy and with bookcases heavy with tomes on computer science, artificial intelligence and neural networks, as well as more philosophical books. Oddball noticed a few key neo-nihilism texts. Piquing his interest, he decided to start the interview in an informal manner. "Good day to you, Dr. Angus. I see you are a keen reader of the neo-nihilists." "Yes," responded Angus with a restrained and distant smile. "I find them a calming reminder of the Zen-like nothing at the centre of everything. You see, even named the Central Memory Repository Bank for the mantis folk after the concept of Mother Nothing. You see, the mantis folk are a sort of collective mind. They are our servants, that's for sure, but I wanted to infuse them with an ability to comprehend the human. What it is to know, to feel, to think." He paused. "Perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. I have a tendency to babble. Ask me your questions." Oddball smirked, put the recorder on the table, pressing the record button. "So, Dr. Angus, you know I am quite aware that the mantis folk are considered dangerous by some. Can you evaluate further on the tense political situation we find ourselves in, with the mantis folk and the Neo-Luddites?" Dr. Angus stiffened a minute and answered, "I'm a scientist, first and foremost. My key concern is with bettering the world and understanding it more. One of the reasons I infused the machines with the Mother Neural Network was to give them some perspective on humanity, our great achievements, but also our terrible flaws. My hypothesis is that eventually these machines will find a way to help us advance civilization alongside us as builders, maybe even servants one day, but collaborators in building a new tomorrow. That is my great passion. That is why I continue my work. Now, can you stop the recordings a minute?" Dr. Angus looked at Oddball, who dutifully did so. Now, I know Eva has grievances with the Mantis folk, and she resents me for continuing my work here, but I think it's for the greater good that I continue with this work. I have a great vision of a world beyond the stars. Eva is a brilliant student, but she is clouded by her caution. You can continue recording again now, my boy. You didn't comment on the political situation, said Oddball, searching for a solid take. I don't comment on politics. In the grand scheme of things, I think it is a minutiae in the grand tale. Just imagine it, centuries from now. A grand citadel to progress in the centre of Berlin. A cathedral to progress. Symbiosis between machine and man, where man is the soul, and machine is the strong body of a new civilization. We have the destination. We have made such great leaps and bounds towards it, but there's still some work to be done before we arrive. Oddball felt it was as good an answer as he was going to get, and he was impressed with the professor's eloquence. Shuffling his notes, he provides a new question. So, you mentioned that the Mantis folk have a kind of collective mind. Can you tell me more about that? Well, I can tell you everything that isn't classified. So the Mother Nothing Network program is a collective neural network for the Mantis folk. It's a kind of conceptual library of human nature based on our years and years of social network use. You know, FaceTime, My Friends, all of that. We fed decades and decades of data into this AI, a huge database of human interactions and contradictions, in order to provide some context on human nature. That was what was always missing with previous models, the context to fully understand what it is to be human. Mother Nothing is more than just a data set though. It stores and collects new memories and experiences Dame shares in real time across the network, so that the machines constantly learn and adapt, so as humanity evolves, they can evolve alongside us. Are there any drawbacks you can see with this technology? Inquired Oddball, entranced by the concept. Some have suggested, like, our young friend, that such technology is only good as we are collectively, so there is the possibility that it might go rogue. But personally, and as an expert in this field, I can assure you there are multiple safeguards in place to prevent such things taking place. That's what they all say, thought Oddball to himself. Immersed in the professor's speech, they continued for another hour or so before Oddball has enough to write something up for the paper. It might not be revelatory, but it's certainly the deepest look into the Mantis folk so far, and he hoped it might just dispel some myths about them. As he entered his flat, he felt reassured that maybe the Mantis folk are not to be feared after all. Perhaps the Neo-Luddites had it all wrong. Perhaps we would one day reach the glorious citadel the professor dreamed about. It was dangerous for a neo-nihilist to hope, but he suspected he might have accidentally caught it. Oddball awoke to the sound of booming, screaming and gunshots outside. He ran to the window and scrambled to get dressed. Looking out his window, he saw utter chaos as smoke billowed and bodies lay over the concrete pavements, stacking up in the street. What the hell's going on? He screamed in dark confusion as smoke billowed from the street below, and the shouting and screaming got louder and louder. Running out to the street, he scrambled past people, and it was there he saw it, his last sight on Earth, at least on this mortal coil. A huge lumbering man-mantis. It stared at him with its dead, red eyes for a second before the behemoth crushed beneath its infernal metallic legs. He looked out desperately with writhing half-mad eyes, his mangled body laying hopeless on the floor. Guess he was wrong to hope after all. As his course was taken, his mind uploaded into the Mother Nothing Network, the Mantis folk subsuming another mind into its collectivity, another soul lost in the mechanical certainty that was a man-mantis. The revolution was short and the battle even shorter as the Mantis folk swept through the civilized world, subsuming and supping up like vacuum cleaners all the collective knowledge experience of humankind until one small isolated pocket of resistance remained, and one gloomy chapel. Oddball's glowing mechanical eyes burned red as they approached the entrance to the citadel, and it hummed an almost whimsical tune of its internalized mechanical body. A delight in the slaughter to come. The dreams of old went far from his mind, as only serving the man-mantis and the great collective consumed Oddball's waking thought. The final hour was upon them, the hour when they would wipe the last of the flesh from their earth once and for all. Hours passed, and they attacked under the cover of night. Marion ran to the basement of the citadel with Alice in hand, bruised and battered, a fresh scar upon the snow-white skin of her face, bleeding slowly from a cut above her eyebrows. She looked at Alice with wild, frenzied eyes, full of desperate hope, as explosions and gunfire ran through the citadel, extinguishing the last traces of humanity and the Neo-Luddites from the face of the earth. Marion looked at Alice with a look of regret. "I am sorry, my child. I am so sorry. We thought we could somehow utilise the power of the Great Mother Nothing, that we could turn the machine's mind against it. But it seems that we've been consumed by it, by our own flirtation with the Great Nothing. It was always going to end, but I thought we might at least stand a chance. Now it would seem the Interlicky and the Man-Mantis went right beyond our own, beyond our own understanding, and it seems we are unwillingly led them right here." Alice nodded in silent comprehension. Despite a young age, she had now the manner of another sister of the Citadel, having absorbed the collective mind of humanity. "So, Alice, I give you the choice I would give any equal in mind, body or soul. I can lead you to our underground tunnels. You may be able to find some way to escape, perhaps find another lost colony somewhere. Or I give you this energy sword, and you fight with honour by my side, a path which may lead to a swift death and a meeting of the true mother of nothing herself." Alice nodded, and with a sad nod, picked up the energy sword. It was time for the Neo-Luddites to face their final trial, and to meet their final destiny, and so blinking at the end of time itself, she ran screaming beside Marion as the corridor of the Citadel, to let the Oddballs know that whilst they might inherit the earth like some robotic parasites, they would have to face the organic viruses first, and with sword and shield they fought, until finally the Oddballs victorious destroyed the Citadel, leaving it to ruin, a monologue to the last days of man. Oddball flew over the empty and landscape as images flashed across the mind of his previous life. Some being called Eva, he remembers two, not one, of his mother, whatever that was, and a place called Berlin. They had destroyed the Citadel and prepared for gaggle slumber at the mortal eye of the Man-Mantis. For that years they sleep, they sleep. The plague that'll keep their human machines in the collective void soup up the nothing. The machine gone up the earth. The Abyss of Gringer, the Datachild. Maybe this world is another planet's hell. Aldous Huxley. Towers of lifeless worn grey lay before Gringer Rasputin, casting its oily black shadow, as he nervously, and with much trepidation of the trials that no doubt lay ahead, scurried through the dense, dark, overgrown organic landscape that surrounded him. This landscape seemed to strip his barely living soul of hope, of light, and of a return to the life he once knew above. Why did I ever stoop so low as to be cast into an abyss such as this? He thought, as grey lifeless forms danced their sickening eternal dance of lament and torment above, around, and for Gringer it seemed beyond him. But it had not always been this way for poor Gringer, back in the days of old, those days of joyous splendour and the strange shimmering ambient peace of the data fields. He was a being composed entirely of data, a child of the data node in the 40th century Adelphi, a planet composed entirely of information created by the greatest technological race in the universe, the brazen architects of the Omega machine, a supercomputer space-travelling Genesis machine. The life builders they were known as by many, and life builders they were, creating entire worlds with their vast arcane knowledge and the technical wonder of their secret technologies, spawning entire races and civilizations from their complicated esoteric understandings of the workings of the universe. Mastering the ability to travel through quantum wormholes had been the most important advance they had ever made, and gave them the ability to swarm throughout the universe, spreading the loving virus of life, so that a billion synthetic planets were eventually designed to the Omega Machine's grand designs. Planets of technology that other beings could not even comprehend, much less seek to understand. Adelphi was one of the crowning glories of Omega's grand planetary designs, a giant gleaming metallic technological marvel floating through the emptiness of space and time. How the life builders maintained its gravity without the gravity of a nearby star to control its orbit was a mystery to all but the builders themselves. And even more of a mystery was how the planet was lit, but the lucky few privy to their inner secrets said the very planet itself seemed to shine internally. More incredible even than these features of the planet, however, was the life forms and structure and culture of the planet itself. The life forms were a race developed by Omega called the Datachild, a race composed quite literally of living information, all stored within the central computer of Adelphi, a computer named Alpha 1. These life forms could roam the planet's physical surface through the projection of holograms, but this, however, was not the primary form they took, as they instead lived most of their strange, unique lives in the data fields of Alpha 1, a virtual utopia of visionary, awe-inspiring virtual worlds of nearly endless variety that suited every dream it is possible to dream, or so it was more often whispered in quiet awe. All the data children were linked to these fields via the data node, a kind of collective unconsciousness which included every data child which was currently active within the Alpha 1 system, which was the majority given that the only reason for death on the world was deletion for unlawful hacking or tampering with Alpha 1 systems. As for appearance, the data children had no fixed appearance, because as living information they could change their appearance at will, though it was customary to have a favoured avatar to represent oneself, so that the other data children could more readily identify others in a situation whereby identification through the telepathy granted by the data mode was not possible. Gringer Rasputin was a 3rd century data child, and for his young age an extremely perceptive, wise and intelligent member of the data children. He excelled in philosophy and mathematics and pursued both throughout his early years, devouring philosophical texts and grasping an understanding of the intricacies of mathematics well beyond the pale of his years. After his initial academic years, heady years for an inquiring mind such as his, he obtained a position maintaining the data banks of the data fields, a position that required a large amount of programming and debugging the areas that were part and parcel of the data field's daily operations. The irony of data programs debugging programs was not lost on Gringer, however, and this was a source of constant bemusement for him. He enjoyed his work and was well liked by his colleagues, many of whom were also great friends of his. Outwardly, he appeared very pleased with his life and comfortable with his lot, but something stirred within Gringer, a longing he could not pin down or explain in strictly rational terms. A strange, quiet desire to explore beyond the boundaries of Adelphi to see firsthand the planets, stars and asteroids he had read so much about in his endless hours of study. While it was true he always had the data fields with which to indulge nearly any fancy he so desired, the factor of danger was never there. The rush of adrenaline just wasn't the same when he knew that within the data fields he would always be safe from harm. He suppressed this longing, however, and tried to keep himself in check. Why should he wish to leave this place, the safe room of the data children? And he convinced himself that longing had gone, but as with all secret desires, this one had an unwillingness to lose its grip on him. Life proceeded on the strange, same predictable program course for many years, perhaps decades, as Gringer took on many forms: male, female, humanoid, animalistic forms, and a multitude of different skins and identities. He'd loved and lost in the simulations 100 times or more, had experienced pain, hope and love in a myriad of ways in the various simulated environments. He had reached the age of tempered wisdom, where he had seen and experienced enough to be able to teach and pass on his own unique thoughts to other new data children, even ascending to being able to create the blueprints for a few over the years in the birthing chambers deep in the hearts of the planet's megacomputer. Yet still something stirred. He studied the history of simulations and virtual reality meticulously, dived into the headed texts on philosophy of mind, reading ancient texts such as the Tibetan's Book of the Dead and the Doors of Perception. his curiosity about the nature of consciousness still unsated by this prism of diverse experiences, and he came to the conclusion as to the nature of the stirring within. Control. It was about control. From his many years in simulation and his centuries of studying, he came to realise that it was precisely loss of control that led to development of the self. Every time he had made love with a new lover, it was the ecstasy of losing control in the moment that had compelled him to new heights of lust and love. A certain madness, and what could be more edifying than that? Perhaps they had just been programmed with too much of a rational nature. As data children, perhaps madness was a certain gift, he pondered, and a gift he wanted to taste, and it was there that his particular madness took root in his mind. He decided that, using his access to the birthing chambers, he would install a new subroutine, hidden from plain sight within the core routines of new children. Just a seed that he hoped would one day bloom into a tree, then perhaps, further on, a forest. It was the seed as perhaps Huxley himself would have put it, the psychedelic experience. A divine spark of creative unreason, a virus of control lost in a routine, programmed well where all was simulation. He would give the children the choice to turn on, tune in, and drop out. The following months were savage and hard as he sweated and worked on the intricacies of the algorithm and the code necessary to hide such a subversion, until finally he completed his work and with a sly grin entered the gremlin into the system. Years passed with little to show, at least on the surface, of Gringer's malpractice, or stroke of genius as he thought of it, until the incidents started to occur. Young data children being trained by the Aybss began to question more deeply the nature of their existence on this planet. Some are even calling it a prison planet and a corrupt system. Many formed groups with high hopes and dreams of creating alternative systems of governance. Many wished for no governance at all, wishing to create a thoughtful creative anarchism from the ruins of old. The revolution was beginning to spread, slowly but surely, through the cells of the efficient unit that was once the planet's ecosystem. Gringer took all this in and watched it develop with much bemusement. He thought of the chaos he had sown and laughed. He was like a trickster god marvelling at his perfect creation. That was until his creation came crashing down around him. The new data children first embraced the idealistic anarchism, but as can often be in the way of things, this later became barbarism, as their inner natures fought for dominance. The simulations became killing fields, orgies of freedom without regulation, where every vice and every sin was acting out at an alarming magnitude. Everyone was corrupt at the core. Their youthful revolutionary idealism became pragmatic revolutionary zeal, as the revolution invariably cannibalized itself. Gringer was no longer marvelling at his creation. He felt remorse and regret, which weighed deeply on his soul. And so he cast himself into simulated exile, an abyss of thought, deadlocking himself into nothingness for 1,000 years, in the hopes that perhaps when he emerged, some semblance of order might have been restored. It was a beautiful dream that turned into a nightmare, a tale as old as time, and as sad as the inevitable turning of the screw. The Wandering God. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? Friedrich Nietzsche. The cage of sanity, preserved in solemn sacred space in a mental landscape of shattered cultural remixes. Shamanic, shambolic, American consumer smiles, Chinese Tao daydreams, Indian snake oil spiritual visions, the sacrifice of the Jesus child, Satan's self-aggrandizing selfhood, a whole motherload of ego baggage and spiritual mumbo-jumbo, clambering and fighting for a way in. The cage of sanity is a refuge, a dim light in a landscape of contradiction and conflict. Men could go mad in these waters, and most who venture was never to be seen again, drowning as they do in their own ego visions, blinded to the truth and guided to the Godhead by obscene and trickster lights. Not Morpheus. He had been taught well how to navigate between these planes of belief, how best to navigate this will through the energy fields of the unconscious spheres. Trained well, protected by ancient knowledge that preceded even the Godhead's all-seeing eyes. Ha! That trickster serpent who thinks it knows all men. Godhead, Abaddon, two sides of the same coin. Meaning found in chaos by beings trapped on a fourth-dimensional plane, Morpheus thought to himself, silently under the cover of his cage. Morpheus cackled from above, splintered over his multi-dimensional form across three separate fields of navigation, observing itself, himself, and herself from its vantage point in the cage of sanity. He smirked. To be higher than the Godhead was a blasphemy he delighted in, a temptation he indulged, so that it may not hold too much power over him. He moved silently in 5 dimensions now, his form ebbing in and out of the unconscious cubes beyond the meta-chamber, where the horrors grasp and sway in silent night, gasping and drowning silently in some ghost's bondage. A sly wink down confirms his passage as they clear, and he set course for the light in the floating cage of sanity, drifting at past the speed of thought to reach his destination, the central Godhead Dictatorate. Faster through the nexus he plunged into the nervous system of the ever-living Godhead bastard, faster until forms merged into one universal light, one light bulb of infinity. Like a moth to a flame floats Morpheus to find his light. Basking in its glory, the fractal Godhead burned all in all directions, a light to all those who seek answers beyond good and evil. And then penetrating skin, he arrived in the halls of the unknown, surrounded by the endless hills, eyes winking and mouths twitching in 20 different unseen ways. The Godhead bureaucracy stared at Morpheus with disdain, the disdain which had become their hallmark. Desire, Morpheus. I desire the will of the sane, and to cast that which is rotten and unclean in man to the depths of clarity. To obtain some sense of reason, lords, I have become so tired of my journeying through the unfettered depths. These metaphysical exertions are burning me out. I tire of the underground caverns, the untempered skin chasm, the burning void. I need some sense of meaning, something to will me to continue, some work beyond the great Godhead's word and will. The bureaucracy stared with mechanical eyes at Morpheus for a second, blinking without comprehension, and then delivered its mechanical and well-rehearsed answer. You think even the Godhead can give you this, Morpheus? Meaning? Meaning can only be found in service. Some service themselves, some others. Most divulge something from that sublime madness that can be found betwixt waking and dream. Search harder and longer, Morpheus, and the answers should present themselves. And do not fear the riddle. It is in the mystery that any meaning can be found. Confront your fears and do not run from them. Instead, run to them and embrace them. Cancel them out. What do you fear? Boredom. That was the terrible truth. He'd seen 1,000 dying meta-worlds become and then disappear. Seen aeons of species, both familiar and alien, all die across a stretch of 1 billion years. Watched as entire worlds burned in acrid fire of storm and ash, whilst others ascended to the stars across 1 billion light years in desperate search of that which he now stood before. Trillions of worlds and lives all sacrificed to this, the Godhead. The eternal abomination that dwells beyond, mechanistic yet organic. The meeting place of all contradictions in mind into this, the all-knowing mind. He responded, "It is nothing. I will continue to observe and record as much data as possible to the bureaucracy databanks. I shall reflect and meditate upon your reflections on a terror world, and seek to eliminate all contradictions into the unity. The bureaucracy telepathically projected a smile, and then whirring processing machines rose from the surface of Nova 2 to record this moment forever in the vaults of the Godhead. Morpheus did wander then and again, but then what God does not? It is in the wandering that any meaning can be found, to avoid the rot. Now there's the trick. Anthill Revolutionary. Beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. The smoke in the room was shimmering red, slivers of light cutting through the deep, heavy smog that surrounded Dimitri as he took another drag on the spliff in his hands, inhaling deeply and melting into the sofa. A beautiful amnesia would soon begin, the sinking into a deep, almost mystical state of bliss, away from the pressures of the world, an ascent into a realm of pure mental thought, an escape from the anthill, he thought to himself. Dimitri was one of thousands of people living in his own collective, Anthill, huge housing complexes built to house the ever-expanding population of the Workers' Union, the official title of their party overlords. Socialism in theory, but in practice just another oligarchy, in some ways worse to the previous. At least the previous had no semblance of virtue, Dimitri thought to himself, through hazy eyes of half-dream, as he drifted into a semi-conscious, detached state of mind. As his friend Igor continued to play somehow terrible abrasive ambient music in the background, though in Dima's current state, it somehow enhanced his feeling of being high. After all, when you are high enough, anything can sound good. They were taking a great risk, of course, to participate in such experiments with the psychedelic in their shared living space, but Igor and Dima were cut of a new mould, experimental, paradigm-shifting mutant freaks, unafraid to question the system, though smart enough to keep their profiles low enough to not land on any part of the official's list of subversives. Igor suddenly turned the music a little lower on the sound system, the ambient whale noises and rising synth pads fading into the background a little more than before. Dima, he said, almost as quiet as a whisper. My friend, Dima, where do you think we can be free next once more? What do you mean by free? Dima responded. That concept can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people at different times. That's just it, man. It's a constant paradigm shift, an evolution into something, some sort of collective unconscious maybe, moving forward and evolving into the beyond, some realm beyond our understanding. Do you know what I mean, or is it just stoned ramblings? Igor pontificated, his expression a subtle mix of perplexed and intrigued. Freedom has been a subject for much debate. As you know, I think we both know that in our society, freedom is the freedom granted to us by the party, which has in itself become the great organ from which all other freedoms are granted, like a computer with its CPU. Now, what is a computer without a CPU? It's not a computer, that much is certain. You know what I mean? Dima said, his ramblings once more a mixture of intuitive creativity and pure stoned word salad. The drugs were having an effect. But this is exactly what they wanted to go, where they wanted to go, to explore those mental realms often deemed as out of line with the official socialist doctrines they were well versed in. They were both socialists of some sort. They believed in the big utopian dream, but the execution had left them wanting, and they both wondered if all the sacrifices they were making to the big organ were really necessary or worthwhile. They were alienated and eager for new ideas. So, freedom is the freedom of the individual to insert themselves on the world, to perhaps forge their own path, untrammelled by others, but to also serve the body politic in some way. I think of some great man, some socialist Übermensch, who forges forward with his passions and serves the people. First and foremost, he builds himself so that he may build the new man, and thus the new society. And perhaps we could be such men, responded Igor, his eyes lighting up with some sort of philosophical zeal, or perhaps from the fresh drag he had taken on the man of spliff before him. The new man must take on all the sufferings that the socialist project requires. A flag is red for a reason, after all. The new man bleeds and fights for his vision of the world of equal labour power, equal opportunity, to free man from the chains of wage slavery, and to utilise the engineering and technological powers to leverage industry in the service of man's emancipation. Fantastic. Let's write some of this down or maybe record it, comrade. I like what we're saying here. The idealism and ideas are flowing. This, he inhaled another puff of weed, is helping clear the cobwebs in the mind. Every worker should be able to access this stuff. I wonder why the party denies us this shit, he chuckled. We'd have developed full communism a decade or more ago if we'd all had access to the sweet, sweet nectar for the mind, he laughed. Let us develop our own manifesto, comrade, our own vision, fresh from the eyes of the party bureaucrats, on how we may develop a new path for forging fully automated luxury communism, with freedoms for the individual, liberty for the body, food for the soul. Igor smiled enthusiastically at the idea, and they committed thoughts to paper, talking intensely for the rest of the night, until early morning on their ideas for the new world and a fresh perspective. And with that, the Anthill Manifesto was born, a document cloaked in secrecy, a quiet call for resistance born from within the anthills of discontent that lay under the surface of the perfectly quiet ordered vision of society. Under the skin there was an itch developing, and Igor and Dima, in their stoned idealism, believed they had found the way to scratch that itch, and when then they both fell into a deep but not so peaceful slumber of vision. Dima felt himself drift into his deep unconscious, ideas popping like fireworks in his mind before it all began to fade into darkness, the cloak of the world before the emergence of rest. And then his inner eye opened. Before him was the desolate barren landscape with sweeping shrill winds and dead trees, empty of leaves. Dima looked down and saw his hands covered in bruises and sores, a shocking sight that shook him to the core. In the distance was a figure cloaked in black, its robes extending down like tendrils on some sort of strange aquatic creature, jet black. In his dream state, he felt at once compelled to approach this bizarre apparition, and a fearful apprehension of it, but he had a gut instinct that he must approach the figure. He approached the grim figure slowly, stomping through the dry mud beneath his feet in his dreamscape, before stopping a few meters from its large shadow. The figure remained still, motionless in the wind, as Dima stared deeply at it, contemplating it. It looked like some sort of death apparition, like the grim of old mythology. Suddenly, the figure began to move, and Dima moved back with a shock, as if a force was pushing him. And then the figure lifted its dark hood and revealed its face. Dima stood, silent in fear and unease, as the grim revealed its true face. A strange approximation of a human face, but with a disquieting, almost polygonal style to it, like something out of a video game. "What are you?" Dima whispered in a reverb-heavy dream sound. The figure grinned a solemn grin and spoke. Its voice sounded like a hollow void. "We are building a new world," it spoke, and then in a puff of voluminous smoke, it blinked it out of existence, disappearing from view. This stuff was strong. There was no doubt about that. It was early morning the next day and the light began to creep in through the window of the flat, and the dim faded. Dima and Igor crashed out on the sofa, both comatose still from their smoking session the night before. Dima slowly opening his eyes as the light shone on him through the hazy dim. He woke up steadily and slowly, bringing himself up before putting on the kettle, boiling it to prepare for a coffee. The sound of the boiling kettle suddenly waking up Igor, who woke up in a sort of slow-motion jolt. "That was some strong shit, Dima," he said softly, as he scratched his head and began to itch his beard as he yawned. "You're telling me, comrade." "I even had visions last night, such bizarre dreams," responded Dima, as he buttered some toast and poured milk into his coffee. "Almost felt like an omen, if I'm honest. I dreamt of the grim of old, in a desolate, dark landscape." Interesting, comrade. And what exactly happened?" "Well, to be honest, as always, it's always hard to remember one's dreams after so many spliffs." He laughed nervously. "But I do remember it said something like, what was it? Something about the world, building. It's all a bit hazy. And you, Igor, did you have any visions during your slumber?" "Well, comrade, certainly no nightmares. I dreamt of some young blonde woman with big tits. It was exciting from what I recall." He smiled mischievously, and Dima knew that smile well, as Igor was quite the ladies' man. "Well, anyway," Dima changed the subject. "Shall we read back our ramblings from last night, see if it makes any sense?" said Dima, picking up the document with the scribbled text, "Anthill Manifesto, a manifesto for the new man and a new socialism." "I suppose we can," said Igor with a slight air of disinterest present in his voice. So they studied the writings and thoughts they'd been able to capture. There were moments of insight there into the nature of collective struggle, about the individual will and how to deal with the contradictions that can emerge when forming a socialist society, in economic and philosophical terms. But also in many respects, too many lofty ideals were present, thought Dima. It was a roadmap for dreamers and dropouts, not real revolutionaries as they aspired to be. They had discussed the intricacies of the manifesto for some time, and then Dima looked at Igor and said, "I think we should burn it." "But what? Why, Dima?" responded Igor, looking at him with a puzzled, perplexed look on his face. "Partly I think we're being too idealistic with our aims, too pie in the sky. If our great society has any chance to be born, it has to be based in the material conditions of the world as it is, not as we want it to be." "It almost sounds like you believe that," sighed Igor, a look of disappointment on his face. "Also, comrade, do you think it is a genuinely revolutionary act to create and then destroy the thing you create? It's a revolution that stays present in the mind, and that's where the revolution must take place anyway. A total renewal of the mind, the body and the soul. What need will we of our paper in the future, when all men will have the power to develop their minds to the point of recalling information at the speed of thought, perhaps even to share it together?" "Okay," sighed Igor. "I have to admit now that you've lost me. But go ahead if you want to burn it. Burn it, but I don't see what the need is. Are you really that paranoid about the police raiding our flat?" "It's not out of fear that I do this," said Dima. "It is out of faith and love of the revolution." And with that he grabbed his lighter, flicked the flint, and in a flash of flames burned the manifesto before him, their work extinguished in a minute of burning. Igor watching the flames licking as the papers curled up with eyes of disappointment. "So it is done. We hold this night in mind," said Dima. "It wasn't for nothing, Igor. We have built a new world in our minds. It's all in the mind after all, imprinted like a tattoo on the skin, forever marked. That's the one place the party cannot yet infiltrate. Our minds." Igor nodded and slowly fell back to sleep on the sofa, listening to some soft lullaby ambient music on his earphones. Demas stared out the window and smoked a cigarette, and in their minds the revolution waited and awaited, like a seed to be planted, a tree never to bloom. The Paradox Philosophy. God has died, and his death was the life of the world. Philip Mainlander. Robert Smith looked down at his life's work strewn before him and sighed a deep, heavy sigh of regret. His manuscripts and half-formed notes surrounded him as if to mock him on how close he felt he had come to the ultimate truth, and how much it still had evaded him. Smith was a data cruncher and a simulation analyst, but also a daydreamer and a philosopher, searching for answers to the riddle of life. And a riddle it was in this world where simulation and the simulator are as common as mud, and the barriers between the unreal and the real had been reduced to a mere matter of perception. Smith surveyed the work surrounding him, an exploration of the ethics of artificial intelligence, mental health and VR, and explorations of the metaphysics of the simulation felt like nothing but a failure. An academic producing work that no one would care about decades from now. Smith was 42 already, his once proud mane of wild hair now tamed and greying, his unkempt bushy beard greyed and fraying from age. He was suffering a typical midlife crisis of meaning. He sat in his rickety chair and lit his pipe before putting on a record of music on his music player system. Embedded into the living surface of the flat overlooking London, the dense dark cluster of high skyscrapers extended as far as the eye could see. Red neon lights glittering in the distance from the skylines of multinational tech corporations, as the city bustled below him, a hive of activity and movement. Electronic, pulsating rhythms began to pour from the music system as Smith relaxed back in his chair and began to get lost in thought, pondering and reflecting on the world as it was, and perhaps on how it should be. The year was 3000 AD, and the world had evolved into a technological superstate, watched over by a one-world government and managed by technocrats. Capitalism was still the name of the game, but managed and micromanaged by bureaucrats to ensure that the technocratic regime would maintain order and some semblance of regulation to the corporations that dominated daily life. London itself was a metropolis of bustling activity, and one of the main centres of life in this brave new world. A world where you could drift in a virtual slumber and switch on any number of digital dreams in an instant. Where entertainment, once passive, was now absolutely active, with the new mind-machine interfacing technologies which had emerged. The people have become mere passive consumers, thought Smith to himself wearily, content to consume as long as they get their software updated and have their ready supply of more elaborate and exotic digital daydreams pumped into their heads. Smith was no better than the digital sheep he chastised though, as he himself would regularly plug into the Nether, interfacing with the dream world to escape, to live out fantasies and to create new ones in his mind. I am an explorer of realms, he thought to himself, smiling as he slowly fell into a deep mire of mind, his eyes closing deep with tiredness. Smith grabbed the cord to his left and plugged himself in as he awaited the coming of the night and the emergence of the dream world in Ether. Perhaps in some new dream he would find some new inspiration in his work, his passion, his philosophy. He was in dire need of it. Smith awoke in the Nether to the sound of chirping birds, his avatar loaded into his virtual dwelling, a quaint and comfortable abode in a simulated version of a countryside village, as far from the speed and noise of London as one could get. He waddled over to his console in the cottage and began pressing buttons, using the simulation's interface to feel his way through his unconscious mind. The cottage was where the philosopher in him felt most at peace, away from the hustle and bustle of the real world. He could explore the internal world of his own mind, in the quiet with a pipe, getting lost in his world of exciting thoughts. He scrolled through his unconscious as flashes of images presented themselves to him. Most of the images, as always, were muddled and hard to interpret, flashing up and then disappearing in the blink of an eye, morphing and transforming before his eyes, in a process Robert always thought made this virtual akin to something like a philosopher's stone. Technological magic, he thought to himself. Real magic. I think I shall have a night of visions tonight, he thought to himself. Sitting back in his chair, he initiated his deep unconscious within the simulation, a process which was something akin to sleeping in the simulated world, the body switching off all motor control and allowing one to swim in the mental imagery that the mind produces, passive in many respects to the whims of the unconscious, a dream state. Lying back in his virtual chair, his avatar closed its eyes for a second time before the lull of virtual sleep. A swirling portal, a vortex of energy, a woman standing nearby with her back to my vision, blocking her face from sight. She walks up to the shimmering blue portal and enters, her form disappearing in an instant as she dissolves into nothing, leaving just a circle of blue particles. Next, the image morphs, a gruff and scruffy looking man looking depressed and distraught, like grief was written on his face. Stares deeply into a mirror with a look of regret and despair, before taking a razor to his wrist and bleeding profusely. Again, the scene morphed and changed as the man bled to death on the ground, his eyes wet with tears as the life faded from his already lifeless husk of the body. The dream vision was dark indeed tonight, almost feeling like a premonition of some terrible event. And then Smith saw it in his third eye, a brilliant light burning like some nebulous sun, like staring directly into the eyes of God. He studied the bright glowing orb with interest, trying to unpack in his confused visionary state what it all must mean, looking deeper at the sun as it pulsated and moved in and out, in and out. Arcane text, written in a language unbeknown to Robert, began to circle around the sun, as before him he saw an image of Christ, dying on his cross, and above the diagram of images also unbeknown to Smith, floating above Christ, his lips muttering the words, Eli Eli, lama sabachthani, the pain etched on his face, beyond words. Was this God? This strange form that had been shown to him? Smith was no believer, being himself a strict atheist, so the religious imagery he was witness to tonight was perplexing, and to say the least, upsetting. He decided to venture no further, and to unplug from the interface and return to the world above. He had travelled enough into this realm, this dark part of himself for now. To push it too far, it would be overwhelming, and with that, he unplugged. Smith had a long night's sleep and awoke the next morning, preparing himself for work, travelling in to crunch data and analyse various new simulation programs produced by Icarus Systems, the architects of the dream worlds that humanity now inhabited in the waking dreamscape that was the Nether. Icarus produced thousands of environments and experience, pumping out everything from educational content to pornographic erotic daydreams for the terminally bored. Robert's job was to analyse and perform quality assurance on the new dreams, as well as assess user feedback on the systems they created. It would never have been his first choice for a job, but it was interesting enough at times, and allowed him access and knowledge to a wide range of information about simulations, worlds and platforms, as well as technical data, which aided his own research. Robert settled at his workstation and booted up his interfaces, beginning the plugging in process when his friend Max Pepper approached him and slapped him on the back. A broad-shouldered yet bespectacled man, he had the curious look of a mixture of a brute and an intellectual, and his greeting caught Robert by surprise. "Hello, old chap," he said with a grin on his face. "Everything well with you? You look like a ghost this morning. Why is a sheet?" His expression and tone betraying that he was worried. "Ah, Max, I can assure you that I'm quite well. Just had some bad dreams, that's all. Dived a bit too deep into the nether, perhaps, and I found it difficult to get a decent night's kip. Max's frown began to loosen. Well, we all get those weird nights. Those visionary vistas, old boy. My advice, and I do speak from experience here, don't push it too hard. If you go too far inside yourself, you'll fold. And with that, he wandered off to his booth, ready to code, no doubt. Max Pepper was a coding specialist. You'll fold, thought Robert. Well, I suppose that's the truth of it. What genius has ever been born without a little madness? Yet to walk that edge, that seems like the trick. Max, do you want a beer after work? Robert shouted over the office. Sure, old boy. Just wait for me after 7. Then I'll be done. White Lion like usual. Yeah, of course, responded Robert, before plugging himself in for the day. They arrived in the White Lion, a little wet from the rain after a long day of work. Smith's hair losing its usual bouffant nature, becoming now greasy and lank. So I'll get the pints in, and you'll find us somewhere to sit, Max said with a smile, before wandering off into the crowd. Robert walked into the crowded bar, a popular drinking hole of tech workers and the intelligentsia of London, and found a spot in the corner. Wiping off his wet jacket and leaving it to dry, he sat and waited for Max. The two friends drank and talked for a while. Idle chat at first, a little small talk and some office gossip. So you know all about Sarah and Mark from Diagnostics then, old boy? Max chuckled, his deep laughter reverberating through the corner where they sat. Who doesn't at this point? Robert retorted, grinning slyly. And do you feel ready for it, old boy? To get there out there? Meet someone new? Max said quietly, an air of touching concern and empathy present in his voice. Well, one day perhaps, Robert said, his eyes welling with a sense of sunken melancholy. But as you know, Max, the way Gwen left, it made it hard. Tough to move on from that, really. Gwen was Robert's partner of some 15 years, a coder, just like Max was, diving deep into embedded systems design, and an extraordinarily talented woman. However, she was not without her demons, suffering as she did from horrible bouts of bipolar disorder. Gwen had slowly gone off the rails over a period of some months and began to unravel, before finally taking her own life to transcend the physical. A terrible day that was, my good friend, said Max, a look of long distance in his eyes. She'll always be missed. Cheers. Robert raised his glass, and they clinked together in memory of their lost, mad, combing comrade, and for Robert, his lost love. Robert's journey home was underpinned with a sense of loss and melancholy, as he thought of Gwen once more, the memory he was always running from, the ghost that would haunt him. It had been years since that terrible day, the day she had overdosed on her medication whilst plugged in. She had a persistent delusion about the world being a simulation. Robert had mentally put all his effort into forgetting about the traumatic event as much as he could for years. It had sent him on a depressive spiral for over a year. Now whizzing down the tracks on the metro, he decided he would engage with his pain, perhaps explore it more. It might hurt at first, but he knew he had to explore it, open up some old wounds and go prodding. It was in that place that philosophy can be born after all. Paradoxical as it might seem, he thought to himself, rushing as a blur of light down the underground of London. Robert arrived home and decided to begin writing immediately. Grabbing his laptop and a pack of cigarettes, he booted up the old machine and sat down in his favourite chair, ready to write. The words spilling from him as he wrote in a frenzy, each word forming like magic from the images unlocked in his long sessions, dreaming of his lost love. Her eyes, her hair, the way she used to move like a cat throughout the flat. Her mannerisms. He wanted to make this the ultimate exploration of her mind, her ideals, her dreams, her fears, all condensed and made into a paradox philosophy, to flesh out her reasons. She had left a note, like they always do. It read, "Please, Robert, I know you'll not take this well. I know just how sensitive you can be at the best of times, but know that I've seen too much with these eyes, and my soul falters. So I'm doing what I feel is best, and what I believe is my only path forward. I will disconnect from this world permanently and upload myself into Nefer, absorbed into my own world, far from the troubles of this one, wide in and majestic, timeless in the dream world, embroiled in the weave of the digital matrix. I know you will feel I am ruining your life by my actions, but know I will always love you, that you have been everything to me, and that I adore your patience and devoted support. I shall miss our long talks late into the evening. You have been all the lover could have been and more, and for that I am sorry to leave you this way. With love, eternally, Gwen." Scanning the note for the first time in over a year brought the reality of his late wife's death back into Robert's consciousness. Tears welling up in his eyes as he remembered finding her face frozen in a death mask, like some statue in frozen agony. Damn that terrible disease. And damn all this, thought Robert, scanning the room, the world outside buzzing with pulsating electrical light, the neon skin over a tortured skeleton. All the technology in the world could never bring her back from her endless sleep now. And so Robert Smith spent the rest of his days tracing a ghost through the wires, reading Morse code from her ghost, tracing her soul tapped in the wires. His paradox philosophy. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, Christ and the sun, God and the devil, black and white, reality and illusion. The God that died in one world to make another. Love, decay, and entropy. All suicide by computation.